boss, they might be the team winning this. In a couple of seconds,
look at the damage from ECLIPSE
catching up.
The damage is insane
so
from
much
them.
Damage.
Can they get the one phase off?
Oh my god.
They can. They're gonna kill the boss.
Oh
my god.
Oh my god.
There's actually Cauterized struck by Hopeful as well, and Spike goes down too. They don't have a battle rest. It's going to be a full wipe for Legendary, as they cannot handle all of this trash on top of the last boss.
This is also wiping. Both teams going down.
Wait, what is AJ doing outside of ECLIPSE? What is he doing? He's dead. He's dead. That's so bad.
The strategy does not work out for them. This is a huge problem for ECLIPSE.
This is their moment. This is their opportunity. They got out of perplex. It's going to be coming down to milliseconds here. One more second. Who won? Did they get it? Okay, who won?
They're catching up. They're taking over. DAWGS are 9%. They're zooming through this boss fight. More to go.
Here we go. Off to the races. Do they have the damage? No, they don't. They're into the intermission phase. On the other hand, Ball Bandits are going to get the burst off. The cast is there, but it's too late. Ball Bandits kills the boss, and they're going to take the dungeon.
Hello and welcome everybody to the Mythic Dungeon International Global Finals. That's right, it's finally here. I'm your host Doa, along with Ironic, Nagura, and Makes to start out the day. And we are in for, I think, one of the best weekends of MDI we've ever had. The top 8 is incredibly tight. I think we're in for a lot of really, really close matches. The dungeons are very good. I'm extremely hyped. Nagura, how are you feeling coming to this weekend?
I mean, I'm feeling amazing coming into this weekend with all of these teams that we have seen from Group A and Group B. Having these incredible performances, and now that all of the teams saw like the strategies of each other, and they can iterate on them now and improve on them. So I do think that we're gonna see just some insane speedruns this weekend.
Yeah, Makes. We've had a couple weeks for the teams to kind of figure things out, especially if they were in Group A. They got a little bit of extra time to watch and learn from Group B, and then a little bit of break. As we look at our bracket here, any surprises in store that you think we might see?
I do think so. Both Echo as well as Mandatory stated that they still have surprises left on the table, and I'm sure some of the other teams have some unrevealed tech as well. So I am looking forward to that. Personally, I was really excited for both our second game teams that we are seeing here. So both Bandits and DAWGS. I think both respectively really impressed me during the Cubs.
Awesome. All right. Well, Zyronic, that means we got to get your input as well. Now, obviously, you know, a lot of us are predicting Echo to make it through. I think a lot of people out there are as well. But if anyone's going to dethrone them, who do you think it's going to be?
I think part of the thing that's interesting about this weekend is every single one of the 8 teams has their own claim to being the team that could potentially take down Echo. I don't think we have a single weak team this weekend, which has not ever been a thing that we've had even in the global finals before. Every single one of these teams has put together insane runs. All of them have potential, like, extremely fast runs. That being said, you do have to pick someone to be a favorite to potentially take out Echo. I don't think I can give you one team. I think the 2 most likely teams that could potentially take out Echo, in my opinion, are probably Perplexed. It's a team that's been that second best team for such a long time. They kind of fell off a little bit recently, but their performance last weekend during Cup B was the best we've seen them in years. This team looks like the Perplexed of old, and adding in Zasevi, they look incredible. The other team that I want to keep an eye on this week is in that very bottom slot, that Mandatory team. When Perplexed was kind of not playing their best games for the past couple of years, Mandatory was that team that rose up to the occasion. They were the second best team behind Echo. They even almost took out Echo a couple of times, taking them to 5-game series in the finals of Global Finals one time, but they were never really able to seal the deal. So those are my 2 options to be the best potential teams to take down Echo. But again, like I said, every single one of these teams has upset potential.
All right. Well, we'll have to wait to see how the weekend plays out. This is our dungeon maps, levels, and affixes. As you can see, we switch it up week to week here. Makes what looks frightening to you? What are some of the dungeons people are going to probably ban, avoid a little bit more? I feel like anything with Sanguine kind of automatically gets one of my votes, but what do you think?
I do think so. Just like as a disclaimer, we did up the key level for finals compared to the cups, so all of the dungeons should be a little bit more difficult. But yeah, I think you're probably looking at those sanguine dungeons like that Darkheart Thicket, where you have a lot of like narrow hallways to get through, where you kind of want to manage that, as well as the Waycrest, in terms of affix management at least. And then I think the 25 at Taldazar could get very interesting with Fortified.
Yeah, so I'm curious now. We saw a lot of 4 DPS during the group stages. With the key level going up, Nagura, what's the viability of that in your opinion? Is it just done now, or are there a couple dungeons that we could possibly still see that on?
I definitely think we're still going to see 4 DPS, but it's going to be more rare than what we've seen in group stages. And it's also going to be, I think it's going to be unclear in which dungeons with which affixes is actually going to be better. I think even during the group stage, we haven't had teams fully agree on where to play 4 DPS and where not, right? So I do think it was already unclear in the lower key levels, and it's going to be even more unclear during this final. So I'm excited to see which teams are going to be more the 4 DPS composition teams, and which teams are going to go more for that for the healer.
Yeah, interesting. Well, here's our matches for today. Again, we have our first 4 matches of the weekend today. There's going to be 6 tomorrow and then another 4 on Sunday. And here's kind of the breakdown of it. So obviously each team does get a ban, but some of the less played dungeons have been kind of shuffled more towards the front. So hopefully we'll see a little bit more of a variety apparently this week as well. But looking through these, you know, does anything stand out, Zyronic?
Well, you know, we're seeing Echo first, and we are guaranteed to see Murazan's Rise first, so we'll see if they have anything else left on the table in that dungeon, if they have more refined that strategy. Remember, that was the dungeon that Dranos walked us through on week 1, where they do a whole bunch of really cool snapping tech with the Rift Mages in that dungeon. We'll have to see what's going on in that dungeon. Hopefully we can see one of the 25s today to see how difficult those are for the teams, but both of those are the last match in a series, so it would both require a game to go to 3 games. And also, the bans would have to be perfect for us to see them. So, don't know if that's possible, but everything being higher level really just ups the level of competition. The difficult pulls, if you go for them, are just that much more difficult. So I assume we're going to see more wiping this weekend than we saw during the Cups, but probably it'll be more even between the 2 teams.
Oh, and check this out. Both ECLIPSE and, well, ECLIPSE has banned Waycrest Manor. Echo banning Throne of the Tides, and I believe that's the 4th time in a row Echo's banned Throne now. So I feel like there's something sneaky going on there. I feel like if we see that come out at some point, we're going to see something spicy. But I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. Waycrest, you know, that was one that was banned out a lot in week 1. That was considered one of the more tougher dungeons. This one, a little bit higher key level at that 24, a little bit more annoying with the Sanguine as well. So, not surprised to see that banned. But, Makes, going to you, Murazan's Rise into Blackrock Hold. You know, Zyronic talked about this a little bit. You know, Echo, I feel like, almost comes into this with a default advantage in that, like, everyone's been trying to catch up to their tech in this dungeon, whereas they're, like Zyronic saying, able to potentially refine it even more, even do something totally different that they've been hiding. What do you think? Is there more to be innovated on that strategy?
I'm always ready for a surprise from our teams, but I do kind of want to note that ECLIPSE in our team's questionnaire that we gave them multiple times referenced training those Rift Mages and figuring out that strat and kind of being very impressed by it as well. I think the Rift Mages, of course, were like 5 of their answers to our questions to them. So I do think they should be ready for this tech.
I mean, you have to, right? I mean, it just makes such a big time difference, it seems like. You got to learn it. But we're about to see right now who takes game number 1, Echo versus ECLIPSE. Let's get into it.
All right, and there we go. We already have a huge pull coming in for both teams, and we also have that no healer comp coming in with those balance druids replacing the healers. ECLIPSE having 2 people go down. It looks like one of the bolts went through, did not get interrupted, and 2 people going down immediately. It's going to be very difficult for them to recover this, as they lost their Bloodlust and most of their offensive cooldowns here, it looks like.
Yeah, so the issue is that they bloodlusted right at the start, and then having players go down just so much more painful to them, whereas Echo on the other side actually worked on grouping everything up, and you can still see it that their bloodlust is still going on as they're now tagging in that second group of ads that's standing to the side there, whereas Eclipse bloodlust has already run out. Of course, now there is going to be that 3 death timer penalty on the side of Eclipse, which definitely puts them in a little bit of a backseat in this series, but like Cyrus said, with the lifted difficulty levels, I do think there's plenty still on the table to be left.
Yeah, very interesting. Now, thankfully, both Krona and Yargi, who were the ones that died to that first volley that went through, did not actually use their 3-minute cooldowns just yet. So the Infernal and their Incarnation has not been used when they went down. So Krona could use that Infernal whenever he came back to the group. And Yargi actually was holding on to the Incarnation all the time, not using it for that first trash pack, presumably because it was already low and was not worth to use. So he's going to be either holding it for a long time, where he would usually use his second set of 3 minutes. Never mind, he is using it here for the boss to get that extra boss DPS in. But yeah, Echo, of course, not having any of those issues on their side. They're up to 49% trash, going to get even more once those Vanguards go down, and they're in their first intermission phase here.
I do want to point out that this is the first time we are seeing the rise on Tyrannical, both in Group A and Group B. It was a fortified key, so we can expect these bosses to take a little bit longer due to how scaling works here. It is going to be something that teams will have to keep in mind. Do you think that's one of the reasons why they're opting to go for the Boomkin as 4th DPS on the healers?
I'm not 100% sure why they play the Moonkin, because the Moonkin is actually known to be a class that is not necessarily very good at providing off healing, or even provide any kind of meaningful healing for themselves. So that is a very interesting choice. They do provide the Mark of the Wild, of course, which is a very, very good class buff to have. Having that versatility buff for everybody is incredibly good. And of course, Druid in general just has an insane amount of utility, right? You have the Master Root, which is going to be incredibly nice later on. You have the Raging Dispel, Soothe as well. You have Dispel. You have AoE interrupts with that Incap Roar and the Typhoon. So definitely lots of utility to be had. But off healing is not necessarily one of the things that Moonkin can do really well. And also surviving themselves without any outside help is not necessarily something that Moonkin is super strong at.
We did see the Moonkin, I believe, in this key as well when Tobo played it, if I'm not remembering this one wrong. And he was playing a build where he was leaning a lot into the kind of off feeling. It was a hybrid between resto and balance, kind of getting all that in there to try and get more of that off healing in, but at the loss of some of that damage. So I am curious what Cyro has to say after this series on how these two Boomkins actually pair up. For now, it is going to be that little mini game that Echo is already in. Of course, Eclipse a little bit behind here after those deaths, taking just a little bit longer to get through it. And one important thing is that after this, you still have to activate the Waystone if you want to have that death respawn waypoint. So that will be something that teams will be looking towards too as well.
Yep, definitely will be. It looks like Celia on Echo's side was actually blasting that trash pack right before this intermission. So using cooldowns there are getting some extra damage in there, which is really nice. Now we do have the double dragons that both Echo and Eclipse are going to be fighting in just a second. Percentage completely even, so both Eclipse and Echo that dealt with the same amount of enemy forces before this maze area.
Yeah,
so
yeah, the minigame.
Yeah. So Eclipse, of course, has either they need to do some insane pulls to be able to catch up to Echo, or of course Echo making any kind of mistake would cause Eclipse to catch up again. They're not that far behind.
They're not. So you can see that they're currently finishing out these dragons, and then they'll get started on this pull here as well. Now, we do know that both teams are going to use these Rift Mages that you are seeing here to actually portal between the boss areas, because in this dungeon you have a lot of travel time. If you want to know more about the strategy, I believe Dratnos did a whole breakdown of it on the YouTube channel as well, but we will be seeing it in real time, so that'll be something to look out for. And that can go wrong as well, of course, and then if you have that travel time added on top, that might change the trajectory between the two teams.
Yeah, one thing I just thought about as well is if you're doing this strategy, because when Echo was doing this, Sally was playing Rasta Druid and was actually solo killing off one of the mobs and then like using Shadow Melt as well to drop aggro. So using a Moonkin doing the same job as the Rasta Druid here with the Rift Mages, that might be one of the reasons why they're playing that. Because for example, an Aug Evoker, of course, cannot have Shadow Melt. There cannot be Night Elves. So that is something to watch out for. Crona does go down for Eclipse as they're having some issue with that trash, not being able to get that Rift Mage back in here, it looks like. And of course...
Cauterize procced.
Yeah, it looks like that. Not looking too good. Yargi is dying on purpose at this point. Yeah. It looks like their strategy just didn't work out that they tried to use with the Rift Mages. So they had to reset combat because they need the Rift Mage for their strategy.
Yeah, so I think the issue is that they got infight with the one in the back, which is the one that, like you said, they usually want to kill off and then use as portal plays. And so now you're actually seeing them run through the maze because they didn't activate that waypoint that I was saying, which is adding more timer to them rather than just being revived right after this.
And we're also looking at Echo right now. Now is in Shadow Melt here, waiting for the summon to happen, while Zelia is trying to finish off this Rift Mage. Actually still being decently high HP. Zelia has to be somewhat careful to not go down here. Of course, also not having many interrupts, as Maris does go down somewhere else on the platform. We do see the portal spawn for Zelia, so this... oh, they cannot put the summoning portal because they're missing Maris.
Yeah, this is really unfortunate. You can see Click's just jumping off there as well. I'm not sure what Maris died to. Maybe he got infight with the stingrays on the side.
Interesting.
This is good for Eclipse, though.
This is definitely very good for Eclipse. Now, Eclipse obviously also having issues with their strategy, with their Riftmate strategy, and they have some catching up to do as well. Oh, Zalia did manage to go back now. Okay, so Zalia usually would be summoned here, but because Mira's not here, they cannot put the portal.
But
now,
he's in fight, no?
Zalia has to... Oh, no, he's not. Alright, so he can cast a revive here.
Okay, it's just a visual.
Oh, alright. Zalia's trying to cast a revive, but he has to be on the other side of this gate. But he's scared
Is that
to pull the
stingray
trash.
bugged?
Like, I think
He's
he's
just
scared of patrol.
Floating there menacingly. On the right side, you're seeing the same thing. You have Kira here with that Rift Mage trying to finish it off to make sure that it is then ported over. This should be where that Shadow Melt comes in, and then it gets ported over to Yark on the other side. Their team survives the way through to the portal, is able to put that Summoning Stone up, and should be able to get that tech going in a couple of seconds. Now, they still have 5 death penalty seconds against them on the comparison to Echo, but this definitely caught them up quite a lot, and that's what we were talking about with how volatile the strategy can be if something does go wrong here. Echo now in fight with the first couple of mobs. Team is back together, but on the right hand side you're seeing the same thing from Eclipse.
Yeah, very well done. We did see both the Vengeance Demon Hunters use their sigil here before they accepted the summon, because of course summon cannot be accepted if you're in combat, so they dropped the sigil to pull the trash, and before the sigil popped, before they actually did damage with it, they accepted the summon, and then that caused those Rift Mages to snap to them. Looks like Echo did deal with it slightly earlier, even with all of those issues that they were having. And now they are engaging Morchi, and of course they also have the 3 mobs from the other boss fight that are snapping to them, which is exactly the strategy that we saw Echo debut the first time in Group A. So we'll see if we can all execute it properly.
Eclipse not getting that snap off, it seems like. So they were over at Morchi's area waiting for the Horde, Farseer, and friends to come on over with Kira, but it didn't seem to work out. So now they actually had to port back, have to do this on its own rather than playing it with Morchi, which we are seeing from Echo, which obviously is a great time save that Eclipse now doesn't have the access to. So throwing them back once again after just having had caught up.
Yeah, and this whole strategy like to set it all up, to set up all of these portals, it takes some time. Now, even if they wouldn't have had issues, of course, it took them even longer because both teams had issues. But even with everything going perfectly, it still costs you some time to set it up. So if you don't manage to snap these 3 mobs to Morchi, then it's actually a time loss to set up these portals, of course. So the fact that Eclipse did not manage to pull it off is a little bit unfortunate for them. We do see Echo getting closer and closer to finishing off Morchi, and then they will be going back to finish off Gromash Hellscream, the one that Eclipse is fighting right now. But Eclipse is a little bit behind in percentage. I think they missed a little bit in the trash area before. I hope that's not something that they're going to be missing later. But yeah, Eclipse has to catch up anyway, somehow, because of this other mistake that they just did with the snapping.
Yeah, that's really unfortunate. Already behind on the clock, and now one more thing that does go wrong here, but for Echo it seems to work out, even despite some trouble with that snapping. Now over to Gromash, already done with Morchi, and we will be seeing them go forward in a couple of seconds. This is where that Bloodlust does come in. For Eclipse, it just happened on Gromash as well. For Echo, it is now going in. Just trying to really maintain speed in this dungeon, go as fast as possible. This boss does a lot of kind of spells where you have to dodge, where you have to move, not something these casters are usually fond of, so better to get through it quickly if you can.
Yep, doing a good job. Both teams now fighting bosses only, no extra trash, should be no problem for them. It is a tyrannical dungeon, but it's only a 23, which is of course not an issue for them, even if they don't have a healer, which is something that they have to look out for, of course, having to play a little bit more defensively than usual. Echo now downing a boss as they're going to be moving on to that last boss's area, and Eclipse still having to finish off Morchi. They do have the Mass Root and the AoE Fear Sigil from the Vengeance Demon Hunter, so they don't have to deal with those images on either of the team sides, and they're dealing with it pretty nicely.
Just to give you a throwback to this dungeon, the fastest we saw was in Group A, of course, from Echo. It was a 24, but fortified. That was 17 minutes, 10 seconds. So we will get a comparison on Woke 1 key level lower, but of course tyrannical here from Echo soon as they are making headway through the end of the dungeon. Eclipse still finishing out on Morchi, that one taking a little bit of extra time. And I really love these kind of tiny details. I keep saying this over and over again, but stuff like putting down that Warlock portal to make sure you're even faster on this hallway here when you're mounted. Just get that extra movement speed in. But now we're in for yet another spicy pull, because no healer means this can really hurt.
Definitely can. We do see some cooldowns coming up in a second. Click's already using that Infernal, actually, even before the mobs are spawning, to get the cooldown back up just in time. We do see PI being used as well. Sally, a Dash of Incarn ready in just a moment, using it immediately. Actually running with a 2-minute Incarn cooldown here. Very interesting. That is something that you usually don't see in live servers at all. But it does make sense for some cooldown timings for them. And yeah, the mobs going down so quickly for Echo, just absolutely blasting through them.
Danger who? Doesn't do any damage if we can kill it first. Exactly what Echo is doing here. Eclipse now trying to catch up on the right hand side, but they still need to actually reach that room first and then deal with the trash, whereas Echo is already finished. You were mentioning the trash count on these teams, so that is something we'll have to keep an eye out on the side of Eclipse, whether or not they actually make those 100%. But Echo might just be running away with this one before Eclipse can even get to that boss room.
Yep, just waiting for that RP to be done. Nothing else for them to do, as they're, of course, at that 100% enemy forces. We're going to keep an eye on Eclipse's enemy forces just in case they were missing a little bit, because they were slightly behind Echo. But it's also possible that Echo just pulled something extra. Lord Deos now being engaged for the left side for Echo. And we'll see how they deal with this boss. Now, of course, this boss can be pretty dangerous. There's a lot of damage coming in. And then there's also magic dispels that you have to do that the keepers are casting onto the group. Now, they do have magic dispels available in the group. They have the mass dispel from Mirrors, and they also possibly have an imp dispel from Clicks as well from the Warlock. But still, this can be pretty dangerous, as there's just so much incoming damage on the group.
Yeah, and you can really see it on the side of Echo every single time one of these orbs crashes down. It's a massive AoE, and they don't have a healer. Just reiterating this one for everybody, it is going to get even crazier in P2 in terms of damage that is going out onto the team. And with these keepers now, it might also get some extra hits. So we will be seeing how they deal with this. For now, they're definitely holding on and dealing with the keepers one by one, making sure they're getting through this boss fight and into that second phase. You can see that Gingy is playing these orbs. He's the dedicated orb gamer here to stay in them, make sure they're dropping down, not at the same time. And here's where the portal comes in to get to the other side of this boss arena to get quicker to the keepers without having to move. Really nice little tech, something we've seen from a couple of the teams. But yeah, doing really good so far.
Yeah, looking very good for Echo. Boss is now in that last phase. We do see some of the Infinity Orbs dropping on the ground. Still, we need to make sure that they are surviving through that dot damage. We can see some of the defensives and ending resolve being used by clicks here. Lots of defensive actually down for both the Warlock and Moonkin. So they have to be a little bit careful here, as some more AoE damage is going to be coming in this phase with the orbs, plus the AoE that happens in this phase as well. Ice Cold being used by Gingy here. So they definitely are spacing out their defensives. Dispersion too by Mirrors, making sure they're not using all of their defensives simultaneously, so they can space out their off healing. But yeah, looking really strong. Boss down to 5% now. Of course, this was not a clean run by Echo, but unfortunately, it was a cleaner run than Eclipse's run. So that means Echo is gonna be finishing off this boss, and they're gonna be the one that win this first dungeon against Eclipse. And I mean, yeah, Echo definitely having some issues. Not what we expect from this team, right?
It's a warm-up key, right?
It is a
Echo
warm-up key.
1-0 for Eclipse. Warm-up key for both teams, but Echo takes this one.
That's right. Echo with the win here in game number 1, but like Nagura mentioned, there's still definitely a little bit of room for improvement there, too. A couple deaths here and there, a couple inefficiencies. So do you feel like we got a good benchmark for this dungeon as far as like what is a good time in Rise with this key level, with these affixes this weekend? Not the best we're gonna see, but certainly far from the worst too from both of these teams. But Echo, getting the lead early.
I mean, yeah, you can get a benchmark from it, but I expect them to go at least a couple minutes faster. Like, there was so much that was happening in the first half of this key. Yeah, this first Radiance going off, killing off 2 of their players, this instantly sets you behind 30 seconds, right? This is like the worst possible scenario that can happen at the start of the key. It's got to be nerves. The first pull is something you've practiced hundreds of times probably, especially since you know it's going to be in your first match. And then, of course, just having more issues in the second trash room area. But the thing that I wanted to focus on was how difficult pulling off this Rift Mage strat is, and we saw both teams having issues with it, but Echo, the team that debuted the tech, is the team that had the most issues with it. It's such a difficult strat to pull off. If one player goes down, you can't drop a summoning stone, you can't summon the healer to the other side, and then that means you can't properly snap the Rift Mages to the right spots. And we saw that happen for Echo. It probably cost them somewhere in the realm of 2 minutes. And pretty hilariously, I'm so sad we don't have a clip of this, we just couldn't find it for some reason. They tried to drop a Savior to save Mirez after he died, and you can see them drop it here in a second after Mirez goes down. Clicks decides, you know what, the Savior isn't working, I'm going to run over and just Soulstone him, because we have to get him alive to drop the Summoning Stone, and the Savior's backfire effect, when it despawns, knocks him off the edge. And it's just like, oh, dude, like...
That's what that was.
I saw it, and I was like, I'm not sure what this interaction is, so I'm not going to say it, but it looks hilarious.
It would have been an amazing clip to have, but unfortunately we didn't have it. You can go back and watch it on the YouTube stream if you want. It happens at 7 minutes and 20 seconds into the dungeon for Echo. I recommend you watch it. It's the most hilarious thing we've seen on broadcast in a while. And it's,
because it looks like he just jumps off, right?
Yeah, he has Burning Rush on. It's like, oh, yep, yeah. I'm just going to jump off, I guess. Yeah. But no, it was the backfire of Savior. But, that probably cost them in the realm of 2 to 2.5 minutes. This run is probably sub 15 if it goes clean for Echo. And I imagine, after having a couple of weeks to practice this, only 1 week on this affix set, that most other teams will have at least ironed out most of the kinks we saw them have during Cup B. And they should be able to put up a similar style of run to what Echo can do with no deaths. But, no, this is definitely not the fastest we're going to see in this dungeon.
All right, so not a great benchmark then. After all, it's a very they've set a low bar, we'll say, that can be exceeded potentially by some of the other teams. We'll have to wait and see who ends up on Rise next. But interesting first run between these two teams. We're going on to Blackrock Hold next, so a chance for redemption from ECLIPSE. And the thing is, they put together a very close match. Versus Perplexed in their Group B match too. So we know ECLIPSE has some very, very fast times potentially for them as we look at some of these numbers here. I want to see the series come back. I know it's against Echo, and I know I predicted Echo to win it all, but still, I do feel like we have potential here for some very, very tight matches, even against teams like Echo.
I do agree with that. Just to kind of give some context for people that aren't familiar with ECLIPSE, I would say these guys are life key pushers. They came into the TGP the first time around, did really well, kind of a very surprising team coming in. And they're definitely a team to watch out for. Some of the names, of course, like Krona, people know, but Kira and IG, for example, both come from like a group of life key pushers. And honestly, I think that we might see more than that first game alluded to between Echo and ECLIPSE here. I think that next dungeon could be pretty spicy.
I mean, we have seen that dungeon be very spicy, especially in Group B. There was a bit of a crazy Blackrock hold. So I don't know if we're going to see something on that level this weekend, but that dungeon can get out of control. Although, as far as I know, no one's been hit by a boulder yet. I've been watching from that. I don't expect it, but I haven't seen one yet, so we'll see.
No
Boulder
boulders.
Watch 2024 still going on, yeah.
Mean bosses, though. Buffed
Oh, yeah.
bosses.
I think
We
you're going to
saw a
have to
couple
go
of
run
those.
some pug keys to see someone get hit by a boulder, Doa. I don't think you're going to see
Oh
it
no,
here.
it's not hard to see it in pugs. Trust me on that one. But MDI, you don't see that very often. Yeah. But you do occasionally see one, too many dominators brought into Smash Spite a little bit later on. So that's been something we've seen. I feel like less of, but still something to keep an eye on. At least for me anyway. What do you guys think? Everyone's kind of quiet over there. Wow, it's kind of thinking, kind of just reminiscing on what we've seen so far today. Just
Well,
taking
I
it
was just
easy,
about to
going into
say
day
that,
number one, kind of.
That I don't think we're gonna see a no healer Blackrock hold, because you know how these MDI teams started sending up the healers up the stairs to stop the boulders from spawning. So they can't
Yeah.
run no healer, because otherwise no one's gonna stop the boulders and they're gonna be unable to get up the stairs. So they need
Oh,
to
is that
heal,
what it is?
you know?
Yeah.
Oh.
No, that tracks.
There you go.
Did you
Can't
get
wait.
that information from Mathnos? It seems
Yeah,
very well
yeah.
thought out.
There you go. What kind of books do you think you find in the bookshelves in Blackrock Hold? Some very tall, narrow bookshelves. Who builds tall, narrow bookshelves like that? Look at that. Look at the thumbnail there. Well, now we can't see it. Now it's
No
just
books
skulls,
here,
but
just
there are
candles.
some there.
Only candles.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you don't want candles and books in the same location.
Yeah,
very
kind of
often.
reckless. I'm not gonna lie.
A little bit, yeah. That's why they just fill their shelves with skulls now. It's much safer. Oh, but see, there's those shelves. Yeah.
We did see a little bit of variation from specifically Echo as they were moving through Group A. At the very first iteration in this dungeon, they actually brought a rogue that they then never played again. I'm actually curious if we're going to see a surprise in here.
You know,
Yeah, I mean, it's a global finals, but it's only day one, so who knows?
I wouldn't be surprised if we saw no healer here. It's something that we saw during Cup B a lot, right? And the affixes don't seem too difficult for it. And it's only one key level higher, so it could be a possibility if they can find a way to live through some of the boss mechanics.
Well, we'll find out. Team's loading into the dungeon. Nagura, you were about to say something?
No, I changed my mind.
Oh, okay. All right.
Okay,
Well, I
Nagura.
just wanted to check, Just wanted to make sure. Just do my job over here. Good to know, though.
Well, now I'm really curious.
Well, I
Whatever
actually just
Zyronic
forgot.
said. Oh, okay. I hate it when that happens. Yeah. Oh, well. I do have to see. Oh, never mind. Forget what I was going to say. As we're getting to the
Yeah.
dungeon, we'll see if ECLIPSE can
There it
tie
is.
this one up.
And it is going to be no healers again on both sides. We're going to see the same combination that we saw in that previous dungeon. And I mean, like Sarah was saying, I think it makes sense, but it also leads to potentially even more spicy situations. Both teams are really taking a run for it as they are getting towards that first boss. Echo already in fight. And you can just see how much it matters when you can get those minute min-max things in, just in terms of making it through the dungeon, but Echo not bloodlusting here as ECLIPSE does.
Very interesting. Echo not bloodlusting here is... Oh, there it is. Okay, so they just delayed their bloodlust, presumably thinking that they don't need to use it immediately. The only reason to use it really, really quickly is because he needed again for the last boss to be able to push it within one phase before that intermission starts. Mirrors does go down to a swirling scythe here. They do immediately use the battle rest to get Mirrors back up, as ECLIPSE also drops a little bit low on IG here, but they didn't manage to recover. But yeah, so much damage going out onto the group.
It absolutely is, but if you are looking at that boss percentage, you can see that ECLIPSE is a little bit in the lead. Now, their Bloodlust, as we said, was used right at the start, so gave them a little bit more uptime on just pure boss damage, whereas Echo delayed it and used it on some of the other trash as well that was running in there. But tragedy is striking as Yarg does go down to the Soul Burst. Now, they think they can just finish this out. 8% on the boss should be easy enough, and then not use that battle rest, because you do have a very long time on that extra RP that you could just use here. But they also need to finish out Ravencrest.
Yeah, Yargi can accept the rest now, because of course once the boss does go down, the graveyard updates and the spawn point is here. So they manage to hold on to their battle rest, which is going to be very valuable for them later on in case something does happen. Echo on the other hand, of course, having their death on Mirrors a little bit earlier, they had to use their battle rest. And one more thing to mention here about Mirrors going down, because they delayed their bloodlust, they delayed the rest of their cooldowns a little bit as well, presumably waiting for the trash to come in. And then Mirrors died pretty quickly after the last was popped, meaning they lost a lot of damage on their Shadow Priest there. But yeah, ECLIPSE, of course, being quicker with their death not costing them as much time, and them finishing up the boss a little bit earlier, they can already move on to this next trash area. This is going to be something that is very important, because we saw a big difference between teams in this trash area, where some teams decided to pull everything, and it is exactly what ECLIPSE is doing as they jump through the whole hallway, and Kira is lining it on the side. This is such a difficult pull to do. Let's see if ECLIPSE can do it.
And it was really cool how he got here as well. I don't know if you caught that, but Kira was actually using the hoverboard to try and get most of the hallway started, so much faster than the rest of the team. That is one pot you cannot use, but still very, very cool. And now this trash pack is just so much you need to keep in mind. We've been seeing a lot of CC come out from players to try and deal with this, so very, very important for them to keep it under control. But AJ does go down here to one of the arcane blitzes, as the incorporeals also spawn, need to get those under control, but they did. And the big issue is that there's just so much that you need to stun to CC, so I feel like this is a place where that boom can actually really shines with all that utility that we are getting. But Arcs is also dropping low here for ECLIPSE.
Yeah, there's a big difference I want to mention real quick as well with the Moonkin. So Salia, I mentioned this before already, is running the 2-minute Incarnation Orbital Strike, which is something that on live servers many people are not running on high keys. But for these lower keys, it makes a lot of sense to have the shorter cooldown and the extra burst. You can see how much damage Salia is doing on this pull, and Yargi not having the Incarn available on pull of this big, insane gathering up of this whole trash that they were doing, just because of the 3-minute cooldown, right? Salia immediately able to pop the cooldowns as soon as they gathered everything up. Yargi on this other side not running the 2-minute Incarn, having to sit on it. Of course, running Arcanic Pulsar instead, which is a huge damage boost as well that Salia is not having on Echo's side, so there's going to be a little bit of back and forth in damage. But yeah, still very interesting to see the difference here, as ECLIPSE did finally manage to finish up the pull. But yeah, just a little bit slow on their side. Maybe they can catch up with Yargi having Incarnation available now, while Echo Salia still is sitting on that cooldown. But yeah, Echo just looking really strong again.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it was due to that death and then losing that damage, losing that control, having to deal with many things at once. You know, that's usually when people try to get a little bit dizzy, and it can happen that just takes much longer than you anticipated, than you practiced. So Echo able to do that same thing, just cleaner, catching up here with the entire team. And now both teams are dealing with Ravencrest.
Oh, Yargin went down right after pressing Incarnation. This is one of the nightmares that Moon Kids hate. You have a 3-minute cooldown, and as soon as you press it, you go down. And as I was saying, maybe Eclipse can catch up because of the 3-minute cooldown of Yargi, but then he goes down and cannot benefit off of that big cooldown. So very unfortunate for Eclipse also. Again, one of those things with the Moonkins maybe not being the tankiest class, especially without having a healer. If you get targeted multiple times in a row with one of these glaives, then it can just be so difficult for them to survive, to self-heal back up. Echo, on the other hand, not having any issues as they're at 18% on Ilisana now. And right after this boss, they're going to be gathering up another huge trash pool. So we'll see if they can execute that. And we'll see what kind of cooldowns they have available. It looks like Incarnation is not going to be ready, PI not going to be ready, so maybe the Infernal is going to be popped for that next pull.
For Echo, they are finished with that boss, and now we go back into the zoomies. We need to get up here. Now, for Doa, I don't think there is going to be any boulder deaths here, especially not on that short walkway, but like you said, a big pull coming up, and this one could be spicy, especially with the Spitefuls, as we do see a portal up to make sure that they can get there even faster. Eclipse on the other side now also finishing out.
Yep. All right, let's see what Echo is gathering up here as they just keep running. They just don't stop.
It's just everything. How much do you want to pull? Yes.
Yeah, it does look like it. So, interestingly enough, they managed to to not be in combat here. So you can see Miris and Gingy having invisibility and Sooth to get past all of this trash. Click's already up here using Summoning Portal, presumably to get Zelia up here, while now is gathering up this whole trash bag. This is such an interesting strategy by Echo. So Zelia does have Shadow Melt available. We see the full Fear Sigil coming in. Oh my god, they're gonna snack them up.
They're gonna snap it. Yeah, this is so cool.
They're melting. All right, you can see the Shadow Melt coming in. The Fear Sigil is done. The boss has been engaged. And they're gonna be
and here comes the trash.
All of the Blade Lords on top of Smash Fight. This is incredible. This is so efficient if they can pull this off.
So this is really cool because, like you said, they use that Fear Sigil and then they summon both of them, and it requires a lot of coordination to make sure you can both get there, get that melt off, make sure everything is there, and then still in fight and get it through the portals. Really, really cool play from Echo. I also love how they were using that portal to actually get there in the first place. I think that was a mass in this from Gingy as well. We did see that in the weeks before that. But this can be really, really spicy. So it's still a scary pull, noting that they do not have a healer. There's a lot of damage going out. The Horde is just running through this arena here. The Spitefuls trying to catch whoever they can with their little hands. But they finished out most of the additional trash. It's just the Incorporals now that they need to get under control. And that one Dominator, as well as the damage that the boss just does regularly. What a pull!
What an incredible strategy here by Echo. Now, they did show this as in their first series against Eclipse, right? So all of the other teams seeing this, they might be like, oh my god, we have to go and practice this right now. But of course, they have games coming up for themselves. But this is certainly something that the other teams, if they're not already doing it, that they might be emulating for the next 2 days here in the global finals, because this is such a cool strategy by Echo. And if executed well, it's going to save you so much time. Now, it certainly is going to be difficult to execute. We just saw with the Rift Mages as well in the previous dungeon that if you have something go wrong, then the whole strategy is just going to fall apart. Same with this. If the Shadow Melt does not go off for Celiar now, if they stay in combat somehow, if the Sigil is not timed perfectly, if someone dies on the way up to the boss to Smash Fight, they cannot summon. There's so many parts that need to work out. And if it doesn't, you lose so much time. This is such a high risk, high reward strategy that we'll see if any of the other teams can even attempt to replicate this strategy within this weekend. But there we go. Echo now gathering up all of the trash up until the last boss. And the last boss on a 24 Tyrannical can do quite a bit of damage in this phase 1.
It can. Additionally, you have this, so now everybody needs to have those happy little feet, needs to move around, make sure that you're dodging all of the additional AoEs and patterns that are landing on the floor. We do have the control coming out there from Mirrors, making sure that Incorporo is not doing anything bad. And when we were on that very first boss, I was a little bit scared for Echo not using that Bloodlust, because usually when they don't, it means that their run is sub 10 minutes. Now, I was very relieved when they used it because it meant that we were not looking at that. That would have been really scary, but 10:30 as we are engaging that final boss is still a crazy time coming out from them here on the right hand side. ECLIPSE will do everything to try and catch up, but it is going to be a very tough battle to fight.
Yeah, definitely will be. We do see Bloodlust still being held onto a little bit. We see the Shadow Melts being used by both Now and Zalia to be able to delay that Shadow Bolt volley, so they have the buff on them. Very nice tech by Echo as well. They are waiting for the intermission to start before they use their Bloodlust, so they are not attempting at all to skip that intermission phase. ECLIPSE, on the other hand, now did reach the last boss as well, and they are fighting all of this trash with Cortalos, and considering the issues that they were having, they're not that far behind. Even considering Echo's strategy, saving them quite a bit of time, pulling everything onto Smash Spite, presumably. I mean, it's possible that this strategy is not actually saving them that much time if the Smash Spite pull takes much longer to pull off. We're gonna have to compare that in a second, but Echo popping the Bloodlust as that intermission is over, and the boss is gonna melt in just a second, and yeah, wow, I mean, I'm just speechless about this strategy that Echo is pulling off here.
Me too, and like you said, that is something that every other team will now be looking at, and if they didn't have this in their practice book already, it does put pressure on them, saying like, hey, new tech just dropped, guess we'll have to practice this as well, as Echo takes that 2-0 to start off our MDI finals.
Yeah, and it's par for the course, right? Echo coming in, winning the match. We're used to seeing it, and you know, map 1 was a little bit rough here and there. Dungeon 2 extremely clean. Got to see a little bit new snapping technique. ECLIPSE looking to finish things out here on their side as well, but they'll be going down to the lower bracket. So, you know, what do you expect? It's Echo. It's so hard to bet against this team because there's just so little evidence that you ever should, right, Zyronic?
Yeah, and I'm just going to dedicate my entire replay section to breaking down that play whenever we get around to it here in a second here. That's just a beautiful play. And realistically, this is just an extension of the strategy that they did in Rise of the Infinite, right? Like it's the same strategy essentially, where you gather up trash, you use Shadow Meld and combat drop tricks, and then doing damage to mobs before you take a summon to snap mobs on top of a boss. And, you know, there were other things that happened in this dungeon as well, right? Like, we saw the consolidation of this entire first hallway before the second boss as well. That's something we didn't see in the cups very often. So, you know, still going faster in ways that are more normal in the dungeon. But throughout the history of the MDI, there's been a sort of a trend or an evolution of how teams have decided to put pulls together. In general, consolidating smaller pulls into bigger pulls was the first things we saw. Then in BFA, we saw teams start to pull big trash pulls on top of bosses and make use of funnel to do more single target damage to the bosses. And now we're seeing a whole bunch of interesting tech to use to drop combat and summon people across the dungeon and get in combat as you take the summon so you can snap mobs across the dungeon. To then also pull mobs that are halfway across the dungeon onto a boss so you can consolidate everything into a big pull once again, and we're just seeing that here. And, you know, this really puts Echo in a sick scenario where they have checkmate in a couple of dungeons if they do their strategy, because I seriously doubt that any other team has even thought of doing this, and while they may try to do it this weekend, in practice, it's probably very difficult to pull off. We'll have to see, and we'll show off the tech here in a sec, obviously. The 3 DPS players, aside from the Boomkin, all went up towards Smash Spite's room. They fear sigil everything in place. They can relax, set everything up, wait for cooldowns. They're both going to Shadow Meld at the same time, both take summons at the same time, and now we'll just Flame Sigil right before he takes the summon so that he gets in combat with them. They even have the Vortex to make sure everything gets stacked up and gets hit by the Flame Sigil as he takes the summon too. It just makes sure that everything gets in combat with the tank and gets snapped up to the boss, and from there all they have to do is make sure they don't let any cast from the Fel Dominator go off, make sure Now doesn't go down to all the tank damage that he's taking, and it put them 50% ahead on a 24 Tyrannical boss, which is really, really hard to come back from.
When you put it like that, it sounds so easy. Yeah. Why doesn't everyone do that? Yeah, just
Yeah,
do
I mean,
that.
I'll be DMing my tank, you know, my tank that I run keys with, you know, and this is the new route. If you're looking in the LFG, it's Echo route or yeah, we can't play, I guess.
+5 Blackrock Hold, must know Echo route. Yep.
Yeah.
That's right. Well, as we check out some of the numbers here, as we sort of break down that series, Nagura, what are your final comments on it? I feel like there's not even a ton to say really. I mean, Echo just kind of doing Echo things. Eclipse, you know, obviously a well-earned spot here, but they're going to have to battle up from the lower bracket, and that's almost what you expect when you run into Echo at the beginning of a weekend like this.
Yeah, I do want to say one thing here about Echo, and it's the fact that, yes, their strategy is incredible, but they definitely did not play perfectly. Like, we've seen Echo have these incredible perfect runs before where they come into a tournament and the first game they're playing, it's just flawless. 0 deaths, and nothing going wrong for them, right? But this time around, they had issues in their Rise, even though they still won. And they also had some issues in this Black Record as well. Now, it was Mirrors going down in their first pull, which ended up costing them quite a bit of time. Like, they were behind to Eclipse initially, right? So if they play against a team that has a similar strategy or that's doing just as well as them, then they lose this map, right? So I do think that Echo definitely not looking 100% perfect, at least in this first series.
They're not infallible, but they've always been good enough. You know, it's been a long time since we've seen Echo lose an MDI, quite a very, very long time. As we look at our bracket again, though, it's time to gaze ahead to our next series. It's going to be Bald Bandits versus Dogs. That'll be coming at you shortly, but we do have our first movement map of the weekend to check out before we get any farther as well, because I'm sure we're going to have a lot of talking to about Bald Bandits versus Dogs later on. But again, if you're unfamiliar with this, our wonderful analysts have to try to guess the boss based on only a map of the movement of the players in the room during it. And backstage, our production is kind of messing with the speed a little bit. It can be faster, it can be slower, it can be a bit of both here. So is this Chronolor Deus, Blight of Galakron, Archdruid, Gladiolus, I got it, Ancient Protectors? Which one? Oh,
I'd like to solve and say it's Razan.
I've been told by production behind the scenes
Always
that this
Razan.
is guaranteed not Razan.
Oh, okay.
He considered putting Razan here. Okay.
Yep.
They were just
There
waiting
he
for
is.
that one.
I'm
It
gonna
is
go
the
with
best.
Archdruid here, I think.
I think you're right. I think it's Archdruid.
Yeah. The big movement on what I think is the tank, I think, explains
I
it.
think the one person is away is always like
Whoa.
beating. I'm not 100% certain because they're not moving that much.
Well,
It could be
Any final
Engineer
answers?
suggestions?
We're running out of time here.
I'm
What are the
second guessing
final
myself. It
answers?
could be Blight of Galakron, actually. The
That's what I
movement
was
makes
kinda
sense if the
wondering.
north side is actually
Yeah?
on the top side of the screen.
Wait,
Yeah.
what is chat
Those are
saying? I'll say what they
classes
say. They're saying Blight.
There's a
Okay,
paladin.
that's my
I think it's
answer.
Blight.
Chat?
Oh, it's a red paladin,
Yeah,
so
Blight.
it could be
Final
Blight.
answers. Final answers. What is
I'm
it?
gonna go with
Zyronic
Blight
says
because I saw the
Blight.
red paladin.
Everyone going Blight, I believe. So what is it? Is it Blight of Galakron? The answer
It's
is
Razan.
Really?
it's Chrono
Chrono
Lord
Lord?
Deus. Wow.
Come on,
Wait, I
chat.
thought it's Chronolor Dares. I just mixed the bosses up.
He's looking at you in such a judging fashion too. Chrono Lord Deus just staring into your soul.
I disagree. Production is wrong. This is Blight of Galakron. I disagree.
Really?
Next.
All right. I don't know if that's allowed. I don't know if that's allowed. Well, we'll take it up with production during the break here. We're gonna take a quick break, and when we come back, we're gonna see our next match of the global finals. It's gonna be Bald Bandits versus Dogs here on the Mythic Dungeon International Global Finals. Do not go anywhere. We'll see you in just a few. Hey, welcome back, everybody, to the Mythic Dungeon International Global Finals. Your host, Doe, here, along with Dratnos, Zyronic, and Nagura, and we're about to see a great match. Dratnos, isn't that right? We have Bald Bandits taking on DAWGS, and DAWGS, you know, they were the only team to hand Echo a loss in the group stage. They got 2-0 by them later, but they showed some really good runs, and supposedly came into the last weekend, that group stage, without a ton of practice. So, what are you expecting out of them this weekend? Are you expecting a lot?
Yeah, I mean, these are two teams that both overperformed expectations during their group weekend, so it's going to be really exciting to see them up against each other. Also, worth noting that their team logos, it's been pointed out to me, are basically an inversion of each other. One, we have, you know, the clothing on the bottom, right, and then like the bald head on top for Bald Bandits, whereas over for DAWGS, we instead have the watermelon on the top, right, and so, like, if you melded these teams together, that would potentially be an unstoppable super team. But, of course, they're not allowed to do that. Only allowed to have 5 players in here. Yeah, look at that.
Wow, yeah. Can we get it, like, halfway and halfway? I don't know if that's possible. There we go. Yeah,
look at that.
Perfect. Yeah. Oh, my gosh. I feel like I'm seeing it into an alternate dimension there. See, when I look at the Bald Bandits logo, though, I just see a Death Star super laser.
Yeah, I can see that as well, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I can't help it. I know that's not the intent, but I just keep seeing that. Yeah. They're out there taking out the planet Aldron. There's nothing we can do about it. But you know what they also did? They almost took out PERPLEXED. They made it all the way to the Group B finals. And a team of veteran dungeon runners, I think they have a good chance to go far this weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. They're an insanely good team, and I just am kind of sad that we're seeing this matchup in the first round, because I would say from both Cup A and Cup B, DAWGS and Bald Bandits were both like the fan favorites. People were spamming their emotes in chat and talking about how fast they were running through the dungeon because they were bald. But one of them has to go to the lower bracket and one of them has to move forward. We're starting off with Everbloom, and then our bans are thrown on the Tides and Ataldazar, so we're going to see Waycrest as a second match, and if we do go through to a third match, we'll see that Blackrick hold again, which I think would be really interesting to see, considering what we just saw from Echo. If either of these two teams has cooked up something similar, that'd be really cool to see right off the bat here.
Yeah, for sure. I'm super curious about this Waycrest Manda, though. I mean, we're going to get there one way or another for our second dungeon. Do you think the changeover with the FXs presents a bigger threat, Nagura? That's a dumb question, but like, how much bigger of a threat does the change mean for the higher key level, the FXs? What do you need to worry about now?
I do think Sanguine is one of the more difficult affixes in Waycrest Manor, just because of the hallways being so narrow. And not only that, there's a lot of mobs that just really don't like moving, and they cannot be knocked or succeed in any kind of way. So you're gonna have, if you want to do big pulls on top of bosses, for example, then Sanguine can cause a lot of issues. And one more thing I do want to talk about is this no healer situation, because earlier, before we saw any of the matches, I said that I think we're going to see 4 DPS comps even less because of the higher key levels, and that only, like, it's going to be rare, and teams are probably not going to be agreeing on if it's better to play without a healer or with. And Everbloom was one of the dungeons where we did see some people play without healers and some with. But this time we have Bursting, and Bursting usually is an affix that makes not running a healer difficult. But we'll see what these teams choose to do, because otherwise you can totally play a 24-hour room without a healer.
Yeah, time to see who takes the early lead.
Yeah, I think Bursting is just a little bit too much, especially with the size of the pulls in this key that, you know, give you a ton of bursting stacks. Number one, you'd be relying on your priest to hit perfect mass dispels on the big pulls every single time. And then number two, you're doing big pulls more than every 2 minutes, right? So, like, how are you really going to deal with bursting every other pull? That being said, right into the first big pull for both of these two teams here. We've seen massive bursts of damage coming out from the Warlocks on this pull in the past, and we're seeing it again here. Let's see just how high they can go. Already cresting the 2 million mark for both of the teams. Can we see 3? Yes, we can for both Warlocks. Yeah. Still going up here. 3.5 million? I think we finally reached the peak. But the pack is already dead. Just like that. 30% of the dungeon deleted for the teams, and we're already off to the first boss here. We'll see a gateway skip and probably some trash pulled along with it for both of the two teams.
Yeah, and just to see how many mobs they've been pulling there. Like, Mike was up to 30 bursting stacks because he was not in the Master Spell area. Did manage to get a Dispel afterwards, but yeah, it was more than 30 mobs in this pool. It's just an insane amount of bursting stacks that they have to deal with. That's why, partially why we see the healer here. But yeah, both teams now onto that first boss. Both teams choosing a similar route as well, going to this boss first. We've seen some teams disagree with this strategy, go to the tree boss first and actually pull the caster mobs from Archmage down, which basically saves you one pull because then you don't have to do the Archmage trash by itself to spawn the boss. So interesting that both of these teams decided to not go with that strategy.
Yeah, I think part of the reason the routing is going to be very similar for most of our teams this weekend is because when you have this affix on your dungeon, you really have to route around it, right? You need to make sure that you have either the Master Spell or the Dwarfs or those bursting stacks. Otherwise, they kind of just stack to the point where they'll 1 or 2 shot your players. So they really can't go for the big pulls. That's why we only saw them pull, 5 Dread Petals with the boss here, because, 5 bursting stacks, that's healable. They can deal with that. But once the Master Spell is back off cooldown, then we can start pulling more trash on top of the boss. Of course, now once one of the casters is dead, that makes it a lot easier to pull on top of the boss as well. And you can see for both teams, Tank is off on the side, pulling some of that trash in. We even have the Ring of Frost down to keep those mobs controlled as they come into the room.
Yeah, looking very similar on both sides. As they're gathering up, they have to be a little bit careful here with this trash, because of course there's damage from the boss that is happening. On top of that, you also have these Berserkers that they pulled that are going to be charging. You can of course interrupt the Berserker's charge if you perfectly time any kind of disrupt. So that's probably what the teams are going to be doing here. None of the affixes is really preventing them use any kind of the disrupts. There's no raging, for example, and bolstering also not something that we have at all in any of the dungeons actually this global final. So not something they have to worry about either. And it looks like they're just so close to each other. All of the trash that for both teams, and they're about to finish up those bosses. I mean, wow, just incredible how close it is.
Neck and neck, even cleave. Both teams have both of the final 2 bosses below 5% now. Only a very tiny trash difference. Maybe 1 extra mob pulled for DAWGS here, but we are through the trio and we're making our way up towards Archmage Soul. Quick little gateway skip coming out from DAWGS. Not seeing it from Bald Bandits. They might be using that gateway later on to skip through a wall or something like that. Let's see what they have cooked up, because they're not just running into this trash. Where are Bald Bandits going here?
Are they going to Witherbark, possibly? Getting the trash down? That would be very interesting. It looks like they are definitely setting up a gateway here. Polymorph going through. Yeah, I think they might be going to Witherbark, setting up the gateway to go back up afterwards. Maybe incorporating the strategy that I just talked about earlier. The strategy where you want to pull the casters that spawn Archmage into this Witherbark pool here to make sure you have to do 1 less trash. But setting up this pool took them quite some time. DAWGS, on the other hand, they're already on the boss. So I'm not sure if this actually is going to be paying off for Bald Bandits. They are doing a big pull here. They have Gnarl Root. Shell does go down for DAWGS though, before pressing Infernal though, thankfully.
He died again instantly. There's no res for him. He's dead for the entire boss. They have to reset this, right? Is there any way to reset this boss? How far would you have to pull it if it does reset? I've never thought about resetting this. Do they have to? Do they just have? Okay, well. I think they have to reset it if they can. I don't know if they can though, because they're still DPSing the boss, and they might have to do this boss with just 1 DPS dead. Oh, this is going to be tough for DAWGS to come back from, because Bald Bandits have already cleared off all their trash, and they're already on to Witherbark, and they're going to catapult ahead with everyone alive for them.
Yeah, this is so bad for DAWGS, unfortunately. Losing Shell twice there, and not having a reliable way of resetting the boss either, because yeah, when Shell died the second time, the boss was still above 90% HP, so it was definitely worth it to reset. But with Velo not having Shadow Melt available, the only people who could have survived, as Fragments does go down actually for Bald Bandits as well. They do have the Battle Res and immediately use that one. Now they're in the same situation where they don't have another rest. If someone goes down for Bald Bandits here, they also have to play this boss with only 4 damage dealers, and with only 3 damage dealers alive. 2, sorry. This 4 DPS comp is it's messing with my brain.
Now, the thing that I'm worried about as well is with fewer targets available for DAWGS, aren't the Cinderbolt Storms going to be that much more difficult for them to deal with?
Yeah.
we're going to have to see if they're able to live through it. Archmage Soul now down below 50% for them. We'll have to look at every single one of these Cinderbolt Storms for them, because it's going to be very scary for them to live through them. It is a tyrannical 24, so these bosses are empowered. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. Cinderbolt Storm will be up next for them, but on the other hand, Bald Bandits is into their first damage intermission. They've let one orb go into the boss here, but they would ideally like to one-phase this.
Yeah, and they of course are also dealing with those mages as I talked about. The Pyromancer are already dead, and now the last caster falling with that Ice Caller. So now they can fully focus on Witherbark and fully focus on stopping these globules or reaching the boss to make sure they can stay in this phase for much longer. But yeah, did a really good job dealing with that trash. DAWGS on the other hand still struggling, trying to finish off this boss with Shellidad, trying to survive that Cinder Storm as well, all of these Cinder Bolts going through. Doing a good job so far. It looks like some of their defensives are still available as well. So I think they should be okay. They also pulled some more trash on top of Archmage here.
They did. They're still going. And honestly, they're, staying ever so slightly ahead of Bald Bandits here. Of course, Witherbark has a bigger HP pool to work through. You're only in that damage amp phase for, roughly 2/3 of the fight. So honestly, it's not looking too bad for DAWGS, but I think it's all going to come down to, number one, how efficiently they're going to be able to deal with the trash in the Witherbark area, if they're going to get all of their trash there. And then I think the other main thing we're going to have to focus on is who's going to be able to one-add the last boss, if that's even possible on 24 Tyrannical with only 3 DPS. I think you're probably guaranteed to get 2. You might even be looking at a 3rd, but they're definitely going to be saving their second Bloodlust for that.
Yeah, definitely going to be doing that as Bald Bandits now done with Witherbark, and they're going to be going straight into Archmage here as the boss is going to be spawned for them already and attackable, as they dealt with those casters already, so they can just do the boss, get some extra trash percentage that they still need before they can go to the last boss. And yeah, it's looking really good for Bald Bandits as long as they don't have any issues here. Now again, they don't have a battle res available, so if anything goes wrong here, they do not have that backup res.
Yeah, gotta keep an eye on every single one of these Cinderbolt Storms. So much burst damage coming out on the group that needs to be dealt with. It's kind of what we saw Shelly go down to the first time, which caused the problem for them when he got res. So, first one looks like it's good. Frag dropping a little low there, but nothing that they can't heal through with the help of that Vampiric Embrace. And I think they're home free once this trash starts to go down. They still have an Arcanomancer alive. I think they're going to be okay with that. Just an interrupt during this fight. Also got to watch out for those spatial disruptions as well, but I think they have, with their triple ranged comp, they should be baiting those relatively easily. And they're looking pretty safe. That battle res will be coming up in about a minute as well, so even if they do have a death here, they'll be able to get somebody up near the end of the fight should they want to. But yeah, you can see the gap that is now being opened up by Bald Bandits here. They have Archmage Soul down below 50% already, whereas DAWGS are only just now engaging Witherbark, which we know is the longer boss.
Yeah, Bald Bandits definitely in the lead with their strategy, and then of course also with DAWGS having that shield or death for the whole boss fight, costing them so much time. DAWGS did pull some more trash on top of Witherbark here, as some of the Naturalists and Dread Petals that they found around, which is also going to be the enemy forces that they still need before they go to the last boss. Bald Bandits still pulled some more trash on top of Archmage Soul, just getting so many enemy forces while fighting Archmage, which is so difficult to do because you have so much damage from the Cinderbolt Storm coming in, plus the bursting that's being applied to everybody, and just all of the things you have to watch out for on this boss fight, in addition to all of the interrupts you have to do with the trash in this area, with those Ice Collars, with the Pyromancers that they're pulling on top.
Yeah, no issues whatsoever for Bald Bandits. Archmage Soul down to 4% here, going to be finished off very, very soon. Okay, one last Cinderbolt Storm, a little bit extra damage for Zati to heal through. As a little thank you very much as they move on towards the rest of the dungeon. They can gateway through the wall here to skip RP. It looks like they're setting up to do that here. There's the gateway from Kush, and the team will go ahead and go on through to get to Yalnu as quickly as possible. The rest of the trash will follow suit and snap on top of them, so they should have their trash count sorted out. DAWGS still whittling away at Witherbark here, but this boss just takes so long. They need something catastrophic to happen to Bald Bandits here. But Bald Bandits are ready to go. They've got the Bloodlust ready, and they are burning this boss. Look at the burst damage coming out from the group here. All 3 DPS, easily over 1 million DPS.
And this is exactly what you want to see in an Everbloom. You do want to have that Bloodlust as soon as you pull the boss. You want to have all of your offensive cooldowns available to nuke the boss as low as possible before you have to start using your damage into those ads that keep spawning. The more ads you get, like, it's just such a big time loss if you get one extra ad compared to another team. So we'll see how many ads they're going to be getting. They do have the first one that they're focusing down. They did die quite quickly. And looking at the boss HP, I think they will be definitely get another one, a second one. If they can skip the third one, that would be really nice.
Heart of the Wild coming out after the Bloodlust. I know JB won't be happy with that one. He'll probably be talking about that over on his co-stream. But still, damage coming out from Bald Bandits. They'll definitely be getting a second ad here. There's no chance they won't with how low the boss is. But they're spawning so many of these extra lashers, and these lashers, while they aren't necessarily the most dangerous thing in the world, if you start letting casts go off on them, they can wipe a group very easily. So you can see they're grouping them all up nicely. They use a Sigil of Silence to make sure they don't cast on the group. And they are home free. And you know what? That's actually a little extra funnel damage for the boss as well. But here we are into the second Verdant Eruption. They have no cooldowns available for this, so this is going to take a little bit longer to kill than normal here. So the damage on the group is going to be relatively high. You can see they have everyone stacked up inside that Life Bloom to make sure that they can heal up more efficiently. And once that ad is down, even using the Convoke here to make sure everyone is nice and topped. Ad is down once again here, and we are back to clearing flowers and doing big boss damage. Of course, that beam being channeled into the boss, letting the group do triple damage to this boss. Are we going to get a third ad, though?
It is possible. We do see DAWGS now also reached Yalnu. Did not use their Bloodlust yet, waiting for some of their offensive cooldowns to be available, as they don't have that Infernal from Shelle up just yet. Already being used, though. But yeah, Bald Bandits, of course, already on 5%. I think they can skip that last ad, which looks really good for them. Yes, they can.
Yes.
And that's it. Bald Bandits winning the Everbloom against DAWG.
Yeah, Bald Bandits with a blazing fast run through Everbloom, and looking great coming into their first match of the day. It was tough because we had such a... DAWGS had an unfortunate moment there, Dratanos. I feel like if that hadn't happened, we would have seen a much closer map. I feel like this is another one where I'm like, I see this one going to 3 dungeons.
Yeah, I mean, I think we were definitely in for a close series here, whether it's a 2-game or a 3-game series. These teams, you could see just from the start of the dungeon how evenly matched they were. One thing I love about Everbloom is just the difference in strategies that we're seeing between teams, right? Whether you are going to do this part of the dungeon or Archmage Soul second after doing the Protectors. I mean, we've seen kind of every combination of the first 3 bosses in all kinds of different orders over the past few weeks, which has been really, really cool to see. I love that. But I do think, yeah, this game came down to the death here on Shelle, followed by the B-res into another death. It was like accepting a res inside one of those arcane swirlies. That ended up being just catastrophic here, and there's really not too much you can do to come back from that sort of thing if your opponents aren't going to let you back in, right? If they're not going to make a mistake of a similar size. I do agree with you guys that after this death came back out here, it was vital that they reset this boss. You can see 94% on Archmage Soul. You can reset Archmage Soul, you just kind of gotta run her down the hill a little bit. It's a little bit obnoxious because there's a bunch of trash there that they haven't pulled, so that's something they would have to work out. But just dealing with Archmage Soul from 94% to 0 when you're down a DPS, like you're missing 30% of your group's damage or something if you're missing a DPS there. So it's going to take so much longer. And I don't know. I mean, maybe there was no coming back from it either way, but I was also thinking that they needed to reset. So I'm not sure. It was a rough turn of events, that's for sure.
Well, it's only 1 dungeon, and as we look at some of the numbers, the next one we're going to look at is Waycrest Manor. That's going to be a little bit spicy. But, Zyronic, Nagura, anything to glean from these numbers? I feel like everything's pretty straightforward with this one from what Dratanos covered. What do you think?
Yeah, honestly, not really.
Yeah.
The fact of the matter is, really, all the DPS meters show us is that one of the teams did more effective DPS because they weren't on a single target boss for an extra 2 minutes. That's really all we saw. And also, they had a lot more DPS time on Yalnu too, which, you know, doing triple DPS to a boss is pretty useful for inflating your DPS meters. If it was a closer dungeon, we could maybe glean a little bit more from that. But I think we saw essentially the same DPS breakdown from both teams, minus, you know, the mishaps on Archmage Soul for the Dogs. But we'll see them come back in this next game. They're a great team. I don't expect one major mistake like that to really hold them back here.
No, not really, and we still have the lower bracket, too, for whoever ends up getting knocked down there out of this match. But, Nagura, we are going to that Waycrest Manor next, and that's when, again, the key levels have been up a little bit. It was already a dungeon people were avoiding. I'm excited to see it. I don't know, I like the bosses in there. It's fun, but we talked about, Everbloom being a dungeon that you have a bunch of different options to route through. I feel like Waycrest is kind of similar. We can see a pretty big variety of strategies.
Yeah, for sure. We definitely can see different strategies. Also, I'm just excited to see how big the pulls are going to be in this dungeon because of Sanguine, and because you can do really big pulls. The fastest run that I've looked at from the group stages that was in Waycrest Manor was from Perplexed, 12 minutes 25 seconds. It was also at 24 Tyrannical as well for them, so it was a pretty comparable key. But they did not have Sanguine, they had Raging instead. So I do think that they might be a little bit slower with that Sanguine affix. But that's definitely something that we can look at, like that timing, like around 12 to 15 minutes.
Well, does the fact that there's a lot of narrow corridors in this dungeon make any difference with Sanguine? It really does kind of reduce how much you pull. But as far as like where you pull it, that's going to be a big consideration too, I think.
So one of the interesting things about Sanguine in this dungeon is when we talk about big pulls on top of bosses, one of the most interesting ones is the Raw room. When you pull trash on top of Raw, you would think that Sanguine is really tough for that boss because the boss doesn't move. But actually, you literally have to pull the mobs like inside his hitbox for the Sanguine they drop to hit him. If you just kill the mobs around the boss, the Sanguine won't actually heal the boss. So that's not something that I'm too worried about. What I'm more worried about is things in the courtyard, pulling stuff on top of Soulbound Goliath, and then maybe pulling stuff on top of Heartsbane Trio as well could be an issue. But the interesting thing about this dungeon is, yes, it's the same level as what we saw in group stages, but we had really nasty affixes for both of our weekends in group stages, right? We had Bolstering in Cup A, and we had Raging in Cup B. Both of those are way more lethal than Sanguine is, but Sanguine can definitely cost you a lot of time if things go wrong.
Yeah, Sanguine also does have a high degree of potential lethality where it's not the affix itself, it's because you're trying to play around Sanguine that you either forget or deprioritize playing around the mob's abilities, and the key level is still high enough here where, you know, if you ignore some spits because you're saving your CCs to knock the mobs out of Sanguine at the end of the pull, like, you're going to die. And I think that's something that the teams, it's going to be really interesting to see. Do we see teams trying to go really big and then just game through it? Or is there going to be a slow and steady approach where it's like, look, if we just pull medium-sized, we have 0 Sanguine healing, we have more than enough abilities to deal with all of the enemy abilities, we're going to actually be faster because we're not biting off more than we can chew. Because Sanguine is really an affix that punishes you if you do bite off more than you can chew.
Yeah, Sanguine has a higher level of, like, dungeon lethality versus, in-game lethality, I suppose, where a couple ticks, one tick on a boss, a bunch of ticks on a mob you didn't control, suddenly you're way behind. So I think we've seen, is it safe to say out of all the affixes that are in the game right now, Sanguine has caused most teams to lose dungeons? Maybe you can talk about that as we get this one started, see if DAWGS can tie it up.
Wow, alright, we do see a rogue come in for Bandits. This is something we've seen from them a lot. Push, of course, loving to play that rogue, so interesting to see it being pulled off here in that Waycrest Manor. Now, the Mistweaver is something that I'm not surprised by. It is something we've seen almost all teams play in Waycrest. Yeah, the rogue definitely something special here. Instead of the Warlock.
That's kind of crazy when you think about it, because from what I've heard from most teams, the Warlock is the more valuable member of the team than the Mage. Although the Mage does a lot more prio damage if the Rogue is going to be providing that mass AoE that the Warlock does. I could see it being a relatively solid one-for-one trade-off. But man, little time to talk about stuff like that as we're already into the first big trash pull on top of bosses here. Here we go into the Heartsbane Trio. Both teams have pulled every single trash mob in this room and in the hallway outside of it into the boss, and we're starting to see what they have to do to make sure Sanguine doesn't go on the boss, using Grip Sigils and Knocks to get this trash away from the boss here, even using a Blast Wave to make sure they don't slowly funnel back into the boss and drop their Sanguine on top of it. letting those mobs cast while they finish them off out on the edge is going to be a little bit of extra damage on the group that they have to worry about as they move on towards Sister Briar here. If any extra overlap happens from those mobs you're letting cast out on the side, in addition to a Jag of Nettles that goes off on a player, could one-shot somebody if they're not careful here, though. First one goes on to Kush, easily going to be able to heal that off. Rogue very, very tanky to that damage, and we're already through to the second phase of the boss for both teams here on our second go-around back onto Selena.
Yeah, it looks like BANDITS is definitely focusing the boss a little bit more in comparison to DAWGS. DAWGS had some issues gathering up all of the trash. Some of the ranged were just standing in the corner casting, and they did try to get some damage onto them and get them gathered up, which cost them a little bit of DPS time on the boss. They're not that far behind, but BANDITS is definitely dealing with this pull a little bit more efficiently. And it also looks like DAWGS has pulled slightly more trash, as they do have a little bit more enemy forces on the board. Now we do see some Sanguine healing go off for BANDITS at the very end, as they got that 10 million heal onto Briar. Yeah, this is unfortunate.
Ooh, okay, yeah, that's pretty bad. That's a lot of boss healing coming out here for them. It's going to set them far behind, which is a little unfortunate because they dealt with the trash, like you mentioned, that much more efficiently than DAWGS did. And actually, really all that's done for DAWGS is set BANDITS back to pretty much neck and neck with the DAWGS. So, well, all net even, essentially, for the BANDITS here. You know, I wonder if without the Warlock in the group, they're committing to having their mage do a lot more AoE damage, maybe flame striking a lot more than they normally would. I wasn't quite paying attention to all of his casts at the start of the pull here, but, you know, considering he is topping the damage meters on the side of BANDITS, Dranako, I would assume he's kind of taking that Warlock AoE role while he's letting Kush, you know, be the more focused damage player for them. And then, of course, Dranako can decide to just do more single target focus damage if he wants to, just by pyroblasting instead of flame striking. Little time to talk here though, as we're into the second big pull of the dungeon on the second boss. Every single mob in the courtyard pulled into the Soulbound Goliath, and there's no Bloodlust available for the teams. They're just doing this with cooldowns. This is crazy.
Very interesting. Alright, so DAWGS not deciding to pull Goliath here, while BANDITS decided to pull everything on top of the boss. Very, very interesting strategy by BANDITS. They have to hope to be a little bit lucky at the start. We did see one of the Thorns go on Fragments here on that Shadow Priest, using the human racial to get out of it. If another Thorns goes on Fragments here immediately afterwards, then they're not going to be able to get rid of that one. They're going to have to DPS through it. Now, of course, if it is on a mage, we can blink out of that one. And Push also has that human racial available. So they do have some tools, but it's some Fragments actually. They did manage to get Fragments out, but that is definitely a little bit unlucky for BANDITS, and good for them for being able to handle it.
Yep, they still have the human racial on Kush, so hopefully it either goes on him or the mage and not Fragments for a third time in a row. It goes on Fragments again!
Oh,
no!
No!
Oh, we are caster cursing this one, Nagura. This is unfortunate for them. This is the thing that can slow them down, and yes, it's RNG, so it's the worst of things that can slow them down, but if these keep going on Fragments and don't go on either of the players that can get rid of those Soul Thorns, that's going to be a huge time loss for them, and it's going to let DAWGS come back into it. Finally a reprieve as the Soul Thorns goes on Kush. He'll happily trade his human racial out for that. And now they're just hoping that as many Soul Thorns as possible go on their mage here. As the trash is dead, and they're going to start chaining this over towards those three casters in the corner that they left alive before they pulled the boss here. DAWGS, on the other hand, slowly catching up on boss damage here as they don't have to worry about trash with it as well. And once again, the Soul Thorn goes on their priest here, and they have to swap their focus to DPSing it down.
They actually have similarly bad RNG here. As Velo does go down for DAWGS, they don't have a Valorous available. I don't think they can recover this. This boss is very, very difficult without the healer alive. They might have to reset it. It looks like Lemike is already moving back. And they're so unlucky as well on both sides. The RNG is not in the favor of either of those teams, as Shelley got 4 Thorns in a row on their side, not being able to get out of all of them, of course. And BANDITS getting the 4 Thorns on the Shadow Priest on their side. So both teams similarly bad RNG with the Thorns there. Very, very unfortunate, as DAWGS has to reset, has
Fragments
to have
again!
the people use their... Yeah, has to release. And yeah, Fragments just soaking all of these Thorns on BANDITS' side.
One single drop of Mage Thorns, please! For both teams. One drop! Alright, this is when the mage needs to just say, everybody stand back. I'll bait this one. There you go, Dranako. Let's go. Got the Soul Thorns. Blinks out of it. They did get the res off, and notably, they don't have a Warlock in their group, so they don't have, you know, a true battle res. They don't have a Soulstone, they don't have a Rebirth, so they have to use the Engineering Bracers to get a res off, which can backfire. It's a very low chance, but it can. I guess you could also use a Tinker that makes it never backfire. They're probably using that if they don't have a true res in their group. But here we go. Setting up for yet another big pull. Notably, so they didn't actually pull the boss into those 3 mobs in the corner, and I wonder if that was because they got bad RNG with Soulthorns that they didn't do it. They're going to have to pull it into this big first pull here, which is going to be a problem. They got to pull a lot of caster mobs together here. You can see they've got Gorgers in here as well. They're going to be charging players, bleeding them, doing a lot of damage. Fragment's got 2 charges there. A Sigil of Silence out to help them a little bit. No extra casts going out, no Thorn debuffs going out. Are they going to be able to keep this up, though? Sanguine starting to drop, and they have a Felnova as the Sanguine comes out here. That's going to be a lot of extra Sanguine healing on the group, and these mobs are still bathing in Sanguine. Not as bad as I thought it was. Only 12 million Sanguine healing, but we cannot afford any more of that on this pull here for them.
Yeah, and look at all the bleeds in the group as well from all of these Gorgers jumping around. Satsi trying so hard to keep everyone alive as they all heal up and having to just be in this pull for a lot longer than you usually are. See some Ratch casts go through, which are the frontals. They have to make sure that they are not standing in that one, as they are jumping out and then casting a frontal immediately afterwards. But it looks like they are finally finishing off this pull. Bald Bandits was behind in enemy forces behind DAWGS because they pulled less trash on top of the Goliath, while DAWGS did one whole trash pull by itself. But now they caught up on trash percentage because of the reset and the issues that DAWGS were having, and now they're pulling a lot of trash onto Ral here. And remember what Sarah mentioned earlier is that the Sanguine here cannot actually heal Ral unless you're dropping it right on top of the hitbox, like in the middle of the hitbox.
Yeah,
even
like
if
right
they're
where they
dropping
are
the
right
Sanguine
now.
around here, then it's going to be totally fine.
Okay, yeah, but you can see they killed it almost exactly on top of him, and that Sanguine is not healing the boss.
They're
It's just
healing him.
The Steward. They're healing the Steward, I think, not the boss.
I think the boss healed for a second. Alright, we're fine.
I'm not
We're good,
sure.
we're good.
I don't think. I think the Sanguine number would be a little bit higher if it got its hit on the
Maybe.
boss.
I just saw
I think they're
it
okay.
jump up 1%, so I was like,
Either way, good execution from them. Just need to make sure they don't have it literally in the hitbox. I mean, yeah, you can see the Sanguine is touching the boss, but it's not actually healing him. The boss's hitbox is actually like almost all the way on the edge of the room, so it's very, very hard to heal him with Sanguine. You literally have to knock the mob like into the boss for it to happen, and these teams are well conditioned to not do that from practice this week, and most of them also played a lot back in BFA when this was one of the premier dungeons back then as well, so they know the strategies here. Both teams now on to Raw the Gluttonous, both teams pulling lots of trash on top of it. I expect to see Bald Bandits go off and pull even more trash into the boss. Yep, we can see some of these piglets coming from the side here. Yips has grabbed extra trash, and they're going to keep cleaving it on down. And you can see what this gap has opened up to now with the mistakes coming in from DAWGS here. 50% advantage for Bald Bandits on the boss, on 24 Tyrannical, is a pretty massive gap to open up. But we've seen things go wrong in almost every single one of these runs today so far. These dungeons are not easy to do perfectly. We could see any number of mistakes, especially if they keep pushing the envelope like we've been seeing in Cup A and Cup B. We know in the Lord and Lady Waycrest area, they like pulling literally every single trash mob in that area into the boss. And on the Sanguine Affix, if one mob dies in the wrong spot, you could be healing up Lord Waycrest a lot.
yeah, for sure. And I mean, we're in the global final now. We talked about how good these teams are, and seeing them struggle here just shows how difficult of like a route and strategy they chose to do, because these teams are so good, and if these teams make mistakes in almost every dungeon here, like almost every team, even Echo earlier just having deaths and having mistakes here and there, really means that they push themselves to like the absolute maximum, and they're running such risky strategies that things can go wrong so easily. So it's just incredible what we see here on these 24 keys, 25 keys, Tyrannical, and with these affixes as well. Just having Sanguine and pulling 50 mobs on top of bosses is absolutely insane. As Bald Bandits did now finish off the Witch, and they're going to be moving into the downstairs area. And yeah, even though Bald Bandits is ahead, as Sarah mentioned, there's so many things that can go wrong because of the just difficulty of these routes that they're running.
I like the routing here from Bald Bandits, though. Having the Rogue available to you, using the Shroud to skip the entire basement, you don't have to deal with that Matron Alma pull that's been so deadly throughout both of our Cup weekends, and we're just heading straight into Lord and Lady Waycrest. Every single trash mob in the room, minus one Soul Charmer they're going to leave alive in the corner, pulled on top of Lord Waycrest. They have the Lust available, but they're not using it here. They must be saving it for the last boss.
This is very interesting because the last boss pull does not seem as difficult as this one here. So they definitely are saving it for some sort of damage increase maybe with the cooldowns later available. But yeah, this very difficult. We do see the Sanguine be dropped underneath Lord Waycrest. Did manage to move it out last second though. But yeah, very well executed by Bald Bandit. Still a lot to go through on this boss and still having to deal with that Soul Charmer and the interrupts.
Yep, great execution, just the Soul Charmer alive, like you mentioned, but they're going to be able to easily deal with that with off kicks. They don't have Lady Waycrest to deal with too much. So, not quite yet anyways. One last phase they have to get through on Lord Waycrest before Lady joins the group, and they actually have something else they have to kick. They'll deal with a Soul Charmer right before that. This is great timing from the team here. Are they going to be pulling in the second Soul Charmer they have left in the back, though? Oh no, that's a little unlucky. I think they got a tiny bit of, like maybe one Sanguine tick on Lord Waycrest there, a little tiny bit of healing on the boss. But because the boss has such little HP, right, it's a boss that heals 3 times, so its actual HP pool isn't that big, the percentage healing isn't going to be that bad for them, so that's not the biggest of deals here. And they're already into the last phase of the boss, as DAWGS is just now starting to get ready to engage the boss. This gap, I fear, has even opened up even further with all of the extra trash that DAWGS had to pull in that basement.
Yeah, definitely. DAWGS now also gathering up all of the trash onto the boss, also holding on to their bloodlust, so both teams deciding they want the last for the last boss. And looking at the enemy forces, they actually still need quite a bit of trash, which you can see Satsi actually using Transcendence, going back as the boss is about to go down, pulling Alma onto the last boss, presumably, with all of the horrors. This is why they're saving Bloodlust, because they're pulling that mini-boss onto the last boss, which is actually insane.
Yeah, this is actually something we saw in the Cups, and I'm surprised we kind of forgot about it. They use the Transcendence tech to get Alma down to the boss here. And right, like you said, once Lady Waycrest go down, we are off to the final boss, running through this corridor, past the Gloom Horrors, pulling them alongside you, even getting a little stunned so they don't do extra damage to one person. You gotta make sure everybody's in combat with them, because those Gloom Horrors like to stack their jumps on top of one person, which can instantly nuke and one-shot a person. But here we go, on to Gorak Tool. The Gloom Horrors coming in behind, and I believe Matron Alma will be slowly rejoining them as well. Just how much burst damage can they do to this boss? And will they actually be able to finish off the boss before Alma gets here? They'll actually probably have to kill Alma off after the fact. They get a kick on the Ruinous Volley. Push. Good. Paying attention there to run over and get that kick off here. And now it's just a matter of making sure you don't get overwhelmed by Death Touch Slavers while you deal with all of this extra damage on top of the boss. Alma can actually be a big nuisance here.
Yeah, definitely. You also have the runes coming out as well, and then you have the interrupt that Alma needs. Well, Gorak Tool also has to be interrupted. One person can interrupt it, but then you also have a captain here that has to be interrupted on the damage reduction buff cast. Otherwise, you're gonna be in trouble, and they have to be, of course, very careful about Sanguine here. Don't want to heal Gorak Tool when it's already down to 26%, as this captain is gonna go down in just a moment. Bald Bandits doing a really good job executing this pull. The captain going down, the Gorak Tool being moved, Alma as well, so Alma not getting the heal off either. And as you mentioned, they might actually finish off the boss before Alma here.
Honestly, that's probably the safe play too, right? Because you don't want to accidentally kill off Alma and then Sanguine the boss, so I believe that is going to be the strategy. Finish off Gorak Tool, down below 5% here, and then our dungeon will end when Alma dies here. Or maybe they'll just kill them both at the same time, but either way, Bald Bandits clean in this dungeon. Just the one single death, and they're going to take a swift 2-0 over the DAWGS.
It's an incredible performance by Bald Bandits to win this one, but I just love this dungeon. I loved watching them do it too, because I feel like this is just one of the best examples of the skill of the players in MDI. When you have this combination of DDR dodging mechanics and things like that, plus you're manipulating the mobs, needing to put them where they need to be to avoid the Sanguine healing, like, this is just such a great dungeon to show the skill of these players, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this was also a very similar story to the Everbloom as well, right? Like, the two teams both looking good, both kind of crunching through the dungeon, things are looking okay. Death, B-res, death, B-res, it's all good, these things happen. And then DAWGS had a death that they didn't have a B-res for on a boss, and it was just, I mean, it was basically over at that point for them. They were in so much trouble, and Bald Bandits did not let them back in. Bald Bandits did not have a similar mistake of that level, and as a result, this series is going to be a 2-0 for Bald Bandits, but I don't know. I mean, DAWGS, they've looked so good in their weekend, And aside from those, the 2 deaths that they did have battle reses for, and then the 2 deaths that they didn't have battle reses for in this series, everything else looked good. It's not like they were running slower routes. It's not like they were having a lot go wrong. It's just like a little bit of things going slightly differently, and I think we could have seen this series absolutely go to that 3rd game. So I'm really hopeful for them in that lower bracket. I think that this is definitely something where they're going to be kicking themselves over how this series went. But Bald Bandits looked really, really good as well, right? Bald Bandits had a similar level, in fact, possibly even a better level of potential, and they also lived up to it much more closely than DAWGS did. So Bald Bandits going to be a very scary competitor. If you're one of the teams that kind of looked at the bracket from Bald Bandits weekend, you're like, that was a fluke, right? They're not, mandatory griefed or whatever, and Bald Bandits took advantage of that, sure, but they're not actually that good. I think you're looking at this series and you're like, okay, hang on. Nope, Bald Bandits, they really showed up. They came to game, and this is going to be a team that joins almost every other team in our bracket as being a team that you're going to be terrified to be paired up against.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking at the Twitch poll prediction results for which team Twitch chat thought was going to win it, and it was 61% for DAWGS, actually. So maybe an upset by Twitch standards anyway, but I think it's kind of like you were saying, Dratnos. I mean, these teams are always going to be playing so close that one death that you don't have a plan for, that you don't have a battle res for, is going to make a big difference, and we're going to see really, really tight results all weekend long, I think, for this.
Absolutely, yeah. It's going to be... I mean, this has got me so hyped for the whole weekend, because you could really pick any 2 teams from the 8 that have qualified here, and I think you're going to get a series of this caliber, right? So that's what we're going to do all weekend. We got so many matches just like that.
Yeah, and I mean, that dungeon even had like the extra mini game of Sobal and Goliath just hating on one person in particular on both teams. So it's almost like they had the same mini game to deal with on that side too, which was kind of another showcase for how do you handle a situation like this.
Yeah, and we were talking about how crazy these matchups are, and we're not stopping, right? Next up, look at the matchups we've got in this first round, right? Next up, we have Perplexed and Legendary, which is like, dude, Perplexed looked like the best that they've looked in years last weekend, right? In Cup B. But Legendary, on the other hand, in Cup A, was a team that had some of the fastest strategies if they were able to do them cleanly. And let's be honest, we all knew that Le Pen was having internet issues at the time, right? Hopefully he had those figured out by now, and they can put together some of those strategies that they showed us in Cup A so we can see a banger of a series here. I think this, like both of these last 2 matchups, have the potential to be even closer than we saw in our first 2 matchups.
Yeah, Perplexed even had that world record at Taldazar at 9:10 too. So some blazing fast times coming out of the dungeons for them. Legendary, of course, will be great too. And you know what else is great? Movement maps. We've got another one. That's right. Let's see it. In case you're new to this again, you got to guess the boss by looking at only the movement from the players. And this weekend, we're actually graying out the player colors too, so you can't as easily tell who's the demon hunter, who's the healer, who's the resto druid. Is it Tyr, Dusarian, Melodrosa, Chillworn, or Smash Fight the Hateful?
So we've got Tyr, the first boss in Rise. We've got Dresser on the 3rd boss in DHT. We've got Melodrosa, Chillworn. My brain isn't working. Which boss is this?
I feel like that's I thought that was Ruby Life Pools. Yeah, that is.
Yeah, that's
Ruby Life Pools first boss.
That's not this
too.
series.
I was like, yeah.
Yeah.
And we've got Smash Spite, 3rd boss in
It's like, wait a
BRH. That's not one of our dungeons. Hold on a minute. Yeah, that's first boss
It's
Ruby Life
Melodrosa,
Pools.
isn't it?
I was like, why is that name so hard to say? I'm like, I haven't said this for a while.
Yeah, you know
Why
what?
haven't I said this for a while? I'm like, oh.
I'm gonna guess it's Melodrosa. Like, why would they put that as an option here if it wasn't possible, right? They went back, they yoinked a
throw us
log
off.
from the Season 1 MDIs, right?
It's Rasan after
I
all.
thought it was all supposed to be from this season. Yeah, it's always
What if it's
Razan.
just Razan?
Yeah.
Wait,
I mean, you see people hiding from the fear maybe there. No, I don't know.
no, you
People are
have
moving
one
out.
person going out to drop the debuff, right? To drop
Chillstorm,
off the
yeah.
puddle, the chill storm. Yeah, this is Melodrosa.
Sure.
I think it's Melodrosa, yeah.
Oh, okay.
The Chillstorm does not
Alright.
happen that often. You only see it twice? Is that good enough?
I didn't even know.
They might
I
see a
didn't even know
third
this
one.
was a possibility.
Yeah, I think it is Melodrosa, yeah. Or? I don't know.
I think it has to
Alright.
be.
Or
Okay, have our analysts been baited
Look
by
at those
the Ruby
classes.
Life Pools boss?
Yeah, look,
Let's find
there's
out.
Season one
yeah.
classes.
Oh,
yeah, those are
yeah,
Season
Season
1
1
classes
classes,
for sure.
it's Melodrosa.
Yeah.
100%.
They tried to get
Uh-huh.
us.
It's getting tricky now. All right. Is it indeed Meladressa Chillworn? Oh, what? Wait. Wait for it.
Yeah.
There you go. Yep. Okay. Well, production trying to be tricky with us this time around. I see. Okay. Well, that's something to keep in mind as we go forward throughout the weekend.
Also,
All
how
right.
interesting is it that I don't remember some of the names from the current season, but I did immediately remember the ones from season 1. My brain
Ruby
works in
Life
mysterious
Pools.
ways.
That dungeon was
Moonkin
just
brain.
seared into your brain, apparently. Yeah. All right. Well, interesting. And we're going to see more of these throughout the weekends. Again, these are all powered by Warcraft logs. You can go check out their newly launched archon.gg/wow for popular builds. Optimize your gear, learn the meta, and even more. That's right. And Warcraft EX on Twitter loves posting these movement maps. So if you just like these in general, go follow them and check it out. It's pretty cool. Yeah. Well, on that note, time to take a quick break. But when we come back, it is going to be another incredible match. Perplexed taking on Legendary here at the Mythic Dungeon International. It is going to be great, and we'll see you for the start of that one just after this. we're back here at the Mythic Dungeon International. Your host, Doa, here, along with Makes, Dratnos, and Teddles, as we go into our third series of the day. It's going to be Perplexed versus Legendary. And, like, every time we look at one of these series, every time we're about to start one, I'm like, this could be a finals of a group, easily. Like, or this could be the finals of an MDI if you just replace one of the teams with Echo. It's on that level. It's a ton of fun. I know. Teddles, welcome. What have you? How have you been enjoying the day?
I think this MDI is super interesting. I think that one of the nice things about this season's dungeon pool is the fact that you have deaths in pretty much every single season, so you don't really know what to anticipate all the time. Some MDIs, the dungeons don't punish you in the exact same way, but this season is definitely a very punishment-heavy set of dungeons, which, as a result, you'll see deaths in pretty much every single series, and it makes it cooler to watch for me, because the results are unexpected.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think specifically this matchup is really interesting because of what we were hitting on top of the day, with Perplexed kind of being in a really good shape from what we saw in the group stages. So kind of coming back to their very old previous high, and definitely a contender to maybe mess with where Echo is going to land later down the line. I think definitely very, very interesting team to watch throughout this cup, but also Legendary had a little bit of internet issues, still made it through. Gonna be spicy, I think.
I mean, I think that says a lot for Lepan and Co, where you can have some internet issues and drop a couple dungeons here and there because of that, and still make it to the global finals. So now, at full strength, I think this team is going to be a real threat. Yeah, and here's the ban: Starkheart Thicket taken out by Perplexed, and it's going to be a Waycrest Manor ban from Legendary. That means we're starting with Throne of the Tides. I feel like, Dratnos, this is one we haven't gotten to see a ton this weekend.
You feel correctly, yeah. This is one that, not just this weekend, but over the course of our MDI so far, we just haven't seen too many Throne of the Tideses. And one of the cool things about this dungeon is that in one of the ones we did see, we saw a very cool, like, Mistweaver port tech that we do see Mistweavers from both sides as well. So we'll see if either or both teams are going to attempt to replicate that here as we are getting underway. Huge pulls coming out as well from both teams. We're expecting pretty much everybody to run all the way down to the Ravager here and get this underway. And yep, teams just mirroring each other exactly here. The Lust being popped by both teams as well. Here they go. A very scary pull here for a little while. Once you get those dogs under control, it stops being quite so lethal.
I think the gather is also particularly annoying. You see Perplexed on the left-hand side. They actually gather at a completely different spot than Legendary. I think the position at which they're gathering this pack allows them to actually get their damage rolling a little bit faster. Now, is that going to make up any additional time? There is Spiteful Shades that you're going to have to kill off as well before you're able to go up into the platform. But look at that. The gather spot that Perplexed chose allowed them to kill off the Spiteful Shades a little bit quicker and get their first pull dealt with slightly faster than that of Legendary.
And they're committing their melds and their invises here for those Spiteful Shades so that they don't actually have to kill them off, and they're all able to just instantly click on that upstairs button, whereas Legendary is just waiting to drop combat.
After last cup, I had a chance to talk to Kira on Eclipse whenever AJ was doing that monk strat, where he was porting outside the room and you're going to pull all the trash into it. He said that it's actually very technically challenging to execute well. Requires like some global perfect stuff to make sure that you don't get gripped back by that crushing tentacle cast. So it's something we're gonna have to watch out for. But that's not gonna happen for another.
Yeah, that's at the end of the dungeon. We're expecting to see that. Oh, we already have our first death of the series though. A Shine just got to get back there. Does go down, and he's gonna take the res. Nearly dies again. Wolf Disco gonna be getting hit by a Cauterize as well. So Perplexed having kind of first blood taken against them here in this game.
Shine lost a lot right there. He dropped his Infernal and then also popped Unending Resolve and still died. I feel like he lost a ton there.
Yeah, Zevi also in a lot of danger here through that Healing Absorb. A Shine now getting that Healing Absorb as well, and a Shine not having very many defensives left over. Does manage to get healed up though. Mistweavers are phenomenal at dealing with that drowning debuff here, right? Like that is one of their specialties is just, somebody needs 10 million healing done to them in the next 4 seconds. That's me. I'm a Mistweaver. I can do that. So really works out nicely against that particular mechanic.
So Perplexed, where I want to say somewhere in the order of about 10 to 15 seconds ahead coming up to the second area, but that death on a Shine, losing that Infernal, now has allowed Legendary on the right side of your screen. You can see that they've already pulled the trash and pulled Lady Nazjar. That's a pretty sizable time advantage, and it looks like they're going to be somewhere in the order of maybe even 20 seconds ahead of where Perplexed are whenever they pull the same boss.
Yeah, I mean, not just the 20 seconds as well, but also 5 seconds of death timer, and they have an extra battle res as well. So
that's true, yeah.
Things are a lot less likely to spiral out of control for Legendary at this point, but they still have to make sure that they are playing it clean, because a lot of things can just fully wipe you in a couple of seconds, whether or not you have that battle res. As you can see, Legendary are fighting the trash here with this boss that does add quite a little bit of lethality to it, right? Especially if you get that healing absorb on you. Ooh, and there's a Volcanic nearly going to take out Wexy. The combo of the Volcanic and the High Tide swirlies, really dangerous, but not something you see a lot on live as well. Volcanic, an affix that really scales with the amount of mobs you pull, so if you're fighting this many enemies, you can see there's just 30 volcanoes spawning every couple of seconds for both teams until they get this under control. But it is still Legendary in the lead. They've escaped that first High Tide phase and are now about to enter the second one here, whereas Perplexed, 20% or so behind on boss HP.
What you think about Arcane versus Fire in this key? There's a distinction
cool.
Because Hopeful likes to play Arcane basically any time that he feels like he can get away with it.
Yeah, we've seen him actually bust out the Arcane before. I believe he's the only mage in our, MDI this season that has used Arcane. Of course, capable of playing Fire as well. I haven't, looked enough into the damage profile in this dungeon to have a really good answer of what the pros and cons are. Is that something you know anything about? What you're gaining and what you're losing by playing Arcane in here in particular?
I think Arcane is a little bit more... so it has a slightly different burst profile. But I think it's just going to end up being more AoE is going to be the end result, whereas that Fire Mage is obviously doing all of their damage to a singular target and just letting it passively cleave with Ignite, whereas the Arcane Mage is going to be doing... With Arcane Blasts and Touch of the Magi and stuff like that, I think a bit more just more AoE in general.
Okay. Yeah, we do have the second boss now getting pulled by Legendary. Perplexed looking for a similar setup as well. It's going to be 2 caster packs, plus that patrolling Snapdragon pack, which is a pretty scary one. And again, 20% boss HP, maybe 13 seconds plus 5 of death timer, so 18 seconds in the lead are Legendary right now, who come into this series as quite substantial underdogs, so this should be really impressive for them if they were able to take this game.
I think that this is probably the closest match that we're going to see today. Legendary, I would argue, is incredibly underseeded relative to their performance in Cup A. Like Mix was talking about earlier, they had a couple of internet issues during Cup A, and so while that's their problem to solve, it ends up resulting in them playing against Cup B's #1 seed. But Legendary looked really good, and I think that that's going to result in an incredibly close matchup, kind of like what we're seeing right here, where Legendary able to capitalize on just a slight mistake, a Shine going down, losing that Infernal, losing them a lot of time. Now, it looks like Perplex is able to catch back up in boss damage, though.
Yeah, Perplexed's damage is just looking kind of incredible here. I mean, if you compare those damage meters between the two teams, pretty similar combat times, but Perplexed doing 20% more damage across the board, and these teams did pull the same packs together as well, so it's a pretty fair comparison. Perplexed just able to optimize a little bit better here, and you can see on those splits, they were 10 seconds faster on this boss split, which means they are now only 3 seconds behind, plus 5 seconds of death timer, plus a battle res. So, certainly still a slight advantage for Legendary, but Perplexed are closing the gap. And actually, you can see Perplexed are going to be the first team to reach the elevator as they're a little bit quicker to do the logistics and the movement here.
What's Legendary doing with their count, I guess, is a better question, too. There's a pretty stark count disparity between these two teams.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to mean one extra pull, basically, or one extra pack into a pull here that Legendary will have to do as they skipped a couple more of those Naga upstairs.
I think they're snapping. Yeah.
So this is the same strat that Echo used in Rise, right? You're going to get summoned, you're going to place that sigil, and then you're going to accept that summon, and now you're in combat with those mobs you sigiled. So that was Sigil of Misery, not Sigil of Flame. So they're going to have to wait for that to actually drop, right, for that Sigil of Misery to break. But that's 20 seconds. In 20 seconds from then, which will be pretty soon, those two mobs are going to snap onto Lepan. And That's going to be huge here. They're setting up a massive pull. That's going to be some extra count they'll be able to pick up, although, this is a lot of danger that they're going to be in for a little while.
Let's talk about going Ozumat first. So what you're seeing from both Perplexed and Legendary is that they're going Ozumat first. The prerequisite things that you need to do to open up the Ozumat gate is basically just killing off all of these sentries. Whenever these mobs die, then that gate's going to be open. You're going to be able to pull into the boss. The reason that they're going Ozumat first, though, is because Monk Transcendence and gaining the damage buff whenever Ozumat is basically killed off the first part of Ozumat, whenever you go into that second phase, whenever you get big and you do bonus damage, both of these teams are going to try to pull mobs from outside the gate and then Transcendence back into the gate and bringing all of the trash that they can reasonably pull with them. Now, this is going to be very difficult for both Tobo and Zasevi to be able to set this up. They're going to be utilizing things such as Black Ox Statue. They're going to have to, life cocoon themselves, pop dampen, pop diffuse to make sure they don't go down. But really watching how they're able to get these packs grouped up. And look at this, Zasevi on the big screen right here, already looking to grab some of the mobs as his group has engaged Ozumat. And Perplexed in the picture-in-picture, kind of doing something similar.
Yeah, this is how this is looking. Zasevi gonna hit that melt button. Yeah. Meanwhile, okay, all right, all good. He's gonna wait here for a little while as his team is working on Ozumat itself, and once the ink of Ozumat goes down, then of course the whole team gets a huge damage healing health buff, and that will allow Zasevi to pretty much grab all of this without being in too much danger of dying. But here he goes. He's starting his run. So 56% on Ink of Ozumat, and he's going to now be gatewaying through. Beautiful Ring of Peace as well. That's going to prevent those mobs from killing him. Dodging around the Unstable Corruptions. Life Cocoon still unbroken on him. One spear is going to land. That's going to just destroy his entire Life Cocoon. Gosh. And this is now tremendous danger here, but he does make it back in range to hit that Transcend. 41% now on Ink of Ozumat for Perplexed, as they are going to be having some extra friends showing up now, and they've got to just kill this Ink of Ozumat before they get in too much trouble from all this extra trash coming in. But Ring of Frost from Wolf Disco is going to be huge for keeping these mobs CC'd as they are coming in. And then that's going to be followed by a Sigil of Chains, a Sigil of Misery, a lot of control coming out. Ozumat's Ink is now at 1% here, and it goes down for Perplexed. Meanwhile, Legendary is still 24% on that Ink of Ozumat. Is Tobo setting up a similar strat for them? I wonder. But yeah, we can see now for Perplexed, they are just able to freely kill off all of this trash for that huge damage buff. That's now over on the left-hand screen. You can see just a bunch of Spiteful Shades. Those don't worry them. Nothing worries them. Spinning Crane Kick is just a nuclear bomb against these trash mobs with that buff. You can see those mobs just getting absolutely annihilated here. Perplexed, 92% count now. Waiting to make sure they've killed off all the trash before they actually finish off Ozumat. And now they're going to just head off towards the final boss here. But Legendary have done it as well. Legendary also successful at setting this up. Tobo, we didn't see him, of course. So many different perspectives we wanted to be following there, but Tobo was also able to get that same strategy going, and Legendary now also able to kill off all of this trash as well. But somehow, Perplexed are just so much faster.
I think it has something to do with how they were doing. So whenever a Shine went down, they pulled a couple of different trash mobs, and while Legendary did snap those invaders like we were sawing with the Lapan Misery stuff, I don't think that ends up making up the amount of time that Perplexed gained by just pulling all of that trash into the Ravager pull that you do in the first, in the Commander Ulthok area. And look at Perplexed on the left-hand side. They're gating through. They're looking like they're getting ready to pull the boss, but Zasevi going down, he does have to get Soul Stoned up as the final boss in this instance is going to be Uranok. And they're pulling all of the minions on top of the boss. Is this the final remainder of their count that they need?
Yep, this is all the count they need for sure here. They will just have to finish off this single pull. This is their Bloodlust as well. They are doing so much damage here. Now, it's worth noting, there is still a 5-second death timer advantage in favor of Legendary, but I don't think that's going to be anywhere close to enough here. Perplexed have just accelerated to such an extent that they're already almost dead here. Yeah, 25% is when Mindbender is going to detach from Arianok there, and they're just going to be able to finish that off. 100% count already as well. A couple of Spiteful Shades that are causing them a little bit of annoyance, but not too much of a big deal here. And Mindbender Gersha already 5% here. Perplexed are just so fast with it. What an unbelievable run out of them.
That was incredible. Perplexed, able to take map number 1, and some stuff we haven't seen yet on this dungeon. So that was a great way to start things for them, and they take a commanding victory early on. And you know, Legendary, I feel like early in the dungeon makes seem to kind of have a good start, but Perplex just pulled ahead. What can you say?
Yeah, I mean, I said this going into the dungeon. I think both of these teams are a lot better than some people might expect. Perplexed due to their recent history and Legendary due to their seeding. But going into this, you kind of had the feeling that they were both very similar in the way that they pulled. I really love these kind of small little tricks that they use to get through the gauntlets here. I just wanted to point them out to people to maybe help someone for their next pug run or something. It's just such
Who's she talking to?
awkward
I
count.
was gonna say.
Yeah, I mean, just trying to point some fingers, but yeah, I really love this pull here. I thought that was so
Cry for
cool
help.
how big Legendary went, but they also already had lost some of that pull count previously to this, so they had to go a little bit bigger here to try and even out the count. It didn't really work in terms of how much time it cost them to catch that up. So Perplex was able to pull on ahead, and then we are going to take a look at that monk once again and see how Sasevia sets it up. You guys explained it, of course, as well, but I just really want to showcase it one more time. Obviously, using all of these defensives, making sure he's as safe as possible with these spears being thrown around. You can see how one just eats up that cocoon, and then just using the Transcendence to go through the wall. Then the rest of the team does hold back the mobs until that Gift of Pure Water is applied to everybody to then be able to fledge it out and get that boss done with the additional buff. I thought was really cool, and I feel like Legendary wasn't that far behind, but of course Perplex just super, super nice.
I think it's kind of unfortunate that Legendary lost this because they were ahead coming off of Ulthok. And sometimes we see strats that are done in the MDI, and they're very fancy with what they're doing, but they're not necessarily faster than, you know, just holding W and pulling the mobs that are directly ahead of you. And Perplex went slightly larger in a different pull, and it wasn't like the nice finesse of, you know, summon snapping mobs, but at the same point it was faster, and I think that it ended up being a pretty big deal, just not having to wait to grab those mobs at the end and instead just pulling them into that Ravager pull. It ended up being a decent amount faster for Perplexed. I think their execution was just quicker.
Yep.
Yes. Go ahead.
Oh,
Go ahead.
Oh,
I hope
there's a ready
everyone's
check.
ready.
click
Admin
that.
1.
Oh, all right.
Wait, go back. Click the ready check, man. We have to
We
click
need that. We need that. Yeah.
I'm ready.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah, click it. Click
There it
it.
is.
Well, I have my
clicked
cursor.
it.
Everyone
Screen.
ready.
Oh my gosh. I think my computer's restarting. I shouldn't
Well, that
have,
would be-
have clicked that.
That would be unfortunate.
No, it's fine. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
That's a good RP of what everybody in my group says after the ready check goes out. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
Hang on,
Hold on, I
BRB,
have to
5
take the
minutes.
dog out.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then they get back,
Exactly.
and then somebody else goes AFK. That's good. You need 7 or 8
Yep.
ready checks before you can corral everybody together and start the key.
Halfway through the countdown. I'm really sorry, guys. It's dinner time. I had no idea this was coming.
Yeah. There's
Right.
no counterplay.
No one could have
Speaking of
predicted
things
this.
that are coming, though, we do have Darkheart Thicket banned on the side of Perplexed. So next dungeon is going to be that Everbloom again. We did see it from Bold Bandits already. So I'm curious if any of the teams is actually faster than what Bold Bandits put down earlier today.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. The Everbloom, I think there is some room for improvement, but I mean, you gotta always say that about the first couple times in the dungeon. But
I heard,
Everbloom is a fun one to see.
I heard lore of some 30 stack mass dispels on bursting. That's always satisfying.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at this, and I feel like Everbloom is the most perplexed favored of these 3 maps that were in our best of 3 here. This is one that I think is going to be a really challenging hurdle for Legendary, because Perplexed looked pretty good in this map back in their weekend, and I think this is going to be a dangerous one, and it's such a short one as well, right? Like, this is a 10-minute dungeon, and then you're out of here. So really, one mistake can just be the nail in the coffin for either team.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, for Legendary, they can't afford to make those mistakes now because they want to tie up this series. They want to be able to force it to a dungeon number 3. And I would be shocked if we made it through the entire day with no 2-1s. Like if there's every, and if we do, it is only going to be by the slimmest of margins. So once again, I expect this game to go 3 maps. Once again, I could be wrong. Who knows? We'll find out soon. We know people are getting ready. We saw the ready check. We know we're only moments away from getting into this dungeon.
What do you think about Archmage? What do you think about Archmage second versus Witherbark second, Dratnos?
I feel like just doing Archmage second and not like moving too much around the map while you're trying to set up things, like I think that you can bait yourself into doing that because it feels more efficient, but in such a short dungeon like this, where the pulls are so short and the bosses are so short and the dungeon is over so quickly, time spent like moving and AFK on your mount while you're waiting for mobs to group is like such a high cost that I think going Archmage second minimizes that. So, I mean, I haven't tested it, right? I haven't, and I assume that the teams have all practiced both and have just done whatever's faster for them. But my intuition is that Archmage Soul second is fastest, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's pretty reasonable. Also, looking at this dungeon, this is the dungeon that was a prime candidate for 4 DPS for most of Cup play. However, with bursting being an added affix, that seems unlikely. I guess there are maybe some ways that you could get around that with dwarves and mass dispel, but I think just gut reaction, I don't think that anybody across the entire weekend is going to be looking to 4 DPS this key.
Yeah, I just don't think I don't think the juice is worth the squeeze in that in the trade-off there, right? Like you're going to be spending so much time trying to be careful with your bursting, make sure you get all your stacks at the same time, hitting it with those massive spells, those dwarves, right? Like everybody's going to be so scared, and that is just not going to be faster than having a healer, because a healer doesn't slow you down by that much, right? Healers let you pull double, triple A bombs, that kind of stuff as well, which is good for time also. So it's not like it's that much worse to be playing a healer. No, none of your DPS are going to have to be spending any time doing healer globals. Your healer can still be doing pretty good damage on bosses as well. So I don't think that you're going to see anybody really seriously attempt 4 DPS in this dungeon this weekend.
The times that 4 DPS are the most viable of the strats is whenever you're like going to do the exact same route almost regardless of what you would have done otherwise. Where in Everbloom on bursting, you're having to amend your route anyways, because bursting is just so challenging in here. I think there's a high opportunity for a decent amount of deaths if any of the bursting gets rolled at an improper time, if they don't get dwarfed off at the correct time, if you don't see the massive spell at the right time. There's always an opportunity for like a lot of deaths in this Everbloom, and this is a very volatile key.
Yeah.
In case anyone's wondering, it seems like we did manage to cast or curse that ready check, so now we are waiting for a small thing apparently to get resolved, and then we'll get into the game. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Well, production, just start the game. Let's just get in there. Just click the key in.
Yeah. I already hit ready, man. Please put the key in the hole.
Slash countdown 10. Let's go.
Yeah. Please. My meta, it's up. Please.
There you go.
All right, now we have to wait 3 minutes for our meta to come back. Okay, it's all good. Yep. Oh, here we go.
Oh my God,
we actually have the pull timer as well. Beautiful.
Time.
This is never before seen footage, by the way.
Here we go. We are underway. And we have, indeed, mirrored compositions from both teams. I do think this is going to be the default in Everbloom for everybody this weekend. This is just such a tried and tested comp at this point. And it's so powerful, that Resto Druid, giving you so much damage while also, of course, being able to heal the bursting without too much trouble. Both teams heading out to the right, grabbing 2 of these abominations and every single other mob in this area as well, and hitting that lust as soon as they can so they can get underway here. This is a very large pull, a lot of count, and notably a lot of stacks of bursting at the end as well.
Yeah.
So the well-timed Mass Dispel is going to take a lot of pressure off of these healers.
Double A-bomb in this area is incredibly dangerous, and you see Tobo almost immediately ripping the Iron Bark on himself. So Tobo and Zasevi, for both Legendary and Perplexed, are probably the most likely people to go down here. So they're going to end up actually dispelling themselves. Now, Lepan and Divine. Lepan had up to 32 stacks of bursting there before getting it mass dispelled off. And Legendary kills off their trash pack a couple of seconds ahead of Perplexed. But I think Perplexed has slightly more optimal movement, which is a weird thing to call out. And they already have their gate down, and Ancients pulled before Legendary, even though Legendary was maybe 2 or 3 seconds ahead on the trash pack.
I don't think that's a weird thing to call out at all. I mean, that's very much what it looked like as well in Throne of the Tides, right? It's just Perplexed were gaining time on all of these kind of movement sections, which, you know, is a really important thing. Again, as I said earlier, with the dungeons being so short, so much value is gained if you can get to a pull in 5 seconds instead of in 8 seconds. So, yeah, I mean, Legendary did, you know, drop combat faster, but Perplexed did enter their next combat still ahead of where Legendary were at. Now you can see for Perplexed, they're focusing down Earthshaper, whereas Legendary focusing down the Life Warden instead. I don't think this changes too much between the two of them, like which of these you focus down, right? It's kind of the same thing because whichever one is left alive will just free cast and will not do any of their special abilities. So it is interesting, though, that they've chosen different ones there.
So typically you go for killing off Earthshaper on live, but it's because Life Warden starts to do weird stuff whenever you end up killing off the Earthshaper first. Basically, the Life Warden will try to cast Revitalize on nothing and just have that ability queued up forever, so they're only going to end up casting bolts. Whereas if you kill off the Life Warden first, the Earthshaper will still do the special cast. So you still have to kick Toxic Bloom, and so you have to have an available kick for that.
Interesting. All right, so a difference in strategy there in terms of which of the first bosses to go down, but something that is the same between the two teams is that as soon as they are down to just 2 enemies in the boss pool, they will increase that and grab all of the trash from this area as well. Lines up pretty nicely with their next set of cooldowns as well. Able to just blast into this. You can see Power Infusion rolling for Legendary. It has expired recently for Perplexed as well. Divine actually in a little bit of trouble there, but does make it back to Fell Eruption and is once again chilling. And yeah, both teams on 0 deaths here as well.
Curse of Tongues with Amp Curse just makes these... Oh, look at that Toxic Bloom. Just a 9-second cast or something ridiculous.
Yeah, not bad. Okay, so maybe that's the idea, right, is you've got a longer cast in Toxic Bloom that you can just milk for all 9 of those seconds and have just a mob that is doing absolutely nothing. As Legendary are going to be finishing off their trash a little bit ahead, and they're also going to be finishing off their boss first. Okay. So once again, we have good news for Legendary. If you're a Legendary fan, just like in that Throne of the Tides, you know, they're coming out to a lead at the start of the dungeon. The question is, can they hold on? Last time they were not able to, and last time as the dungeon reached the kind of mid and late parts, they were really a lot slower than Perplexed. But here goes Legendary. They're going to be grabbing all this trash and fighting it here. So they're going to be doing Archmage Soul second. Meanwhile, Perplexed hitting a U-turn here and are heading back towards the other boss, the tree boss, and are instead going to be doing that second. Yeah, Witherbark.
yeah, the tree boss.
Oh, hopeful down.
I feel pretty vindicated the fact that you and I talked about this at the very beginning about going to the different sides. Legendary, this pull that they're doing is incredibly sus. They have double Arcanomancer, plus the other 2 casting, the Ice Caller and the Pyromancer. So the Archmage Soul Trash plus that Patrolling caster is very, very dangerous. They do have Curse of Tongues on all these mobs, which helps out a little bit, but the incoming damage here is still brutal.
Yeah, I miss back when you could play Venthyr and lob that spaghetti meatball in and automatically curse all the mobs in the pack with 1 global. That was a niche Covenant ability you could use back in Shadowlands that would accomplish that.
In a while.
Yeah, but Legendary do manage to finish off all of that trash. You're making good use out of that curse. Zevi down for Perplexed. So both teams now have lost a player. Both teams have committed their battle res, so they are on even footing from here. Legendary working on Archmage Soul, whereas Perplexed are finishing off some of that Archmage Soul trash before they get into Witherbark here. And we're going to really get a good kind of one-to-one comparison of how exactly these two different strategies will compete against each other.
So Witherbark notoriously has a decent amount more health than Archmage Soul, so it should take a little bit longer to kill off. These MDI teams, whenever we were watching the keys earlier, on a 24 Tyrannical, they're going to have to go through 2 vulnerability windows almost regardless, which means that Witherbark just as a boss is more or less on a static timer. That means that like the more trash you can deal with this boss is really ideal for being able to get him killed off, since he's going to be about the 230 mark almost regardless of what you're doing here.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, both bosses, it is really valuable to be fighting trash with the boss, and you can see both teams have added trash to their pulls and are working on that, although, you know, Legendary, of course, you have to be a little bit more conservative. Pulling trash onto Archmage Soul is a little bit sketchier, right? You can kind of fight as many of these assistants as you want because those mostly just do damage to your tank, but you don't really want to add too many of those casters to the party here, so that's something that they're being a little careful of, just adding one Ice Caller to the fray.
I think their pacing on getting these mobs pulled in was also really nice. So they had Mass Dispel early on for all of the assistants whenever they did the large pull with all of the casters, but they Mass Dispelled that, and then their dwarves were on CD, and so they kind of waited for their dwarf ability to come up before pulling all these hapless assistants. They're going to die here in a couple of seconds, and I kind of suspect that they're going to rip dwarves here. Maybe they're actually just going to be able to heal through 7 stacks, and they have it pulled at a different time to where they don't have a Cinderstorm volley going off, and Toba's just able to heal through that. I think that's actually a very interesting strat. Now they have their dwarves available for Witherbark Trash.
Oh, and Splat down for Legendary. Wexy down as well. An unfortunate combo there. That Arcane Grip is going to take him into one of those swirlies of the Cinderbolt Storm. Now, luckily for Legendary, things are low enough here that they're able to get this killed off, and they should be able to deploy a Mass Res here. So this is going to be only minus 20 seconds or so for them. But we're talking about a 10-minute dungeon, so there's no such thing as only minus 20 seconds. Minus 20 seconds is catastrophic for Legendary. They are hoping to be able to catch back up here, but Perplexed are now in a huge advantage.
Where did Perplexed get this trash from? I looked away, and then I look back, and next thing you know, they just have 100 cultivators.
That is a mystery. I'm not sure.
Actually, where did they come from?
Yeah, either way, Legendary...
I'm trying to look at the VOD, but I actually don't see where it came from.
Legendary have all of the trash needed to spawn Witherbark grouped up here. You can see on the enemy forces count. Once this trash dies for Legendary, the two teams will be roughly equal on count. Legendary will pull a bunch of stuff onto Witherbark. Perplexed will go and kill Archmage Soul and some trash in that area. And then both teams will be at 100%, and it'll just be a question of the last boss. And I mean, Perplexed have a huge advantage here at this point, I think. That the end of Archmage Soul for Legendary cost them quite a bit of time, so it's going to be really hard to actually directly compare them because their routes are different, but I feel like Perplexed have to be like 30 seconds in the lead now.
Okay, I got a guy DMing me. He said Ashine left a Warlock pet outside of the room to pull the trash in later.
Okay. That's pretty nifty. Just left it outside the whole fight and then grabbed some stuff with it.
You don't need the Fell Hunter.
That's cool. That's what's that thing good for anyways? Here goes Perplex, though. They are right into Archmage Soul. They, of course, already killed off the 3 mobs that are required to spawn it. And now they are going to be fighting a bunch of Dread Petals as well with this boss. Presumably we'll be seeing some hapless assistants and stuff joining the fun as well later on during this one.
I feel like this is an incredibly good run for Perplexed. I think that the way that they were pulling a lot of that trash into Witherbark really sped up their run, taking the Archmage Soul mini bosses, those casters, and doing that with the entire Witherbark room trash. While it is probably the hardest pull that we've seen so far between these two teams, it really accelerated their key a lot, and that's why you're seeing them just nuking down Archmage Soul. While Legendary, they're playing the very slow Witherbark.
Yeah, this is going to be just very painful to watch if you're a Legendary fan, because this boss's health just moves so slowly. It's just got so much health. Even with this damage amp, they are going to be busy for a while here, whereas Perplexed, you know, the light at the end of the tunnel is near here for them. They do need to find some count, and that's what they're up to right now. Divine is grabbing... actually, it's going to be several of these casters, so this is really sketchy here. For Perplexed, now they are in a lot of danger for a little while. If they can get through this pull here with this trash, I think they're going to be home free, but this is probably one of the scariest parts of the dungeon for them is, you know, Archmage Soul is lethal in her own right, but now they're adding a bunch of extra mobs. You can see Wolf Disco dropping extremely low, but does get saved. Barely there. Perplexed able to just hold on a little while longer.
Well, they got bursting coming through here, and look, dwarves are being pressed for both swag and to shine. Wolf Disco holding onto his dwarf, not actually needing it for those stacks of bursting. I think we're going to get one more scary phase from Archmage Soul with that Cinderstorm volley, but as long as the Arcanomancer and this Ice Caller are going to be able to be kicked, it should be pretty low group damage.
Yeah, up next is I think a Fire plus Arcane combo. Here it is, the Cinderbolt Storm coming out for Archmage Soul, and that Arcane Orb as well, but Wolf Disco baited it so far away that it's just not going to overlap at all for them. No worries of getting accidentally dragged into a fire puddle. And so Perplexed able to kill off Archmage Soul here. 94% count, so that'll be these 6 hapless assistants. And you can see Divine grabbing him, taking him over to the side, a shine, Warlock Gateway through, the entire rest of the group able to now enter that portal. And Divine will be following behind, bringing those mobs with him as well. They'll be snapping
You want some
soon.
good tech? If you don't have an SSD, you should actually do this dungeon on M0 and zone in through that portal to make sure that your load screen's a little bit faster.
That's good tech. That's the kind of thing we love to hear. Yeah, as Perplexed underway on the last boss, that Lust is popped. They are doing some big damage here on pull, but they have to be careful because these hapless assistants are going to be snapping in, and it looks like they have all now snapped in. All the threat is on Divine. That is going well. The Verdant Eruption comes out now, and if they can kill this tree, then they should be able to start focusing on the boss. It is a 24 Tyrannical, so we're probably not going to see it go from 70 to 0 in just one phase, especially because Lust is going to be fading. Legendary are also on the boss here as well. Legendary already at 100% count as well. No need of grabbing those assistants too. But Legendary are looking at a stark health disadvantage on the boss, and a 10-second death disadvantage as well that is just going to be really hard for them to overcome here. You can see Perplexed back into that damage amp on the boss, just blasting into the boss as much as they can here. If they can just avoid dying, they should be in decent shape here. A bunch of Lashers are going to spawn. Those are pretty dangerous, but the combination of Demon Hunter sigils will keep them entirely under control until they are just killed off for free by all of this damage. Legendary are hitting the Lust, though. They've saved it until now for this burn. So maybe if they can take this boss from 73 to 0 before that next tree spawns with the power of that Bloodlust, that would be their way back into this game, because Perplexed do have to kill off another tree here. I just don't think the Lust is going to be enough. I don't think on 24 Tyrannical you can do that much damage to actually kill the boss off before the next tree spawns. But if they can, that is their way back into it. They are doing a lot of damage here. Perplexed also back into a damage amp phase, though. It is a Verdant Eruption for Legendary, so they are going to have to kill off another tree here, but Perplexed are pumping into the boss. Can they kill before they get their next tree? That is the question at this point, because it's a few more seconds. One more Colossal Slam, and then it's going to be a Verdant Eruption here for Perplexed. 5% on the boss as they are nearing the finish line here. 2%. That's going to be all it takes for Perplexed. 100% count. They are done with this dungeon. Beautiful series out of Perplexed. What a dominating performance out of them.
That's right, our Group B champions getting the 2-0, moving on in the upper bracket, but yet another 2-0. We didn't get a third dungeon for the third time today. I'm kind of shocked, but again, it was just by the slimmest of margins once more.
It was. So right at this boss, it actually looked once again like Legendary were a little bit in the lead. They pulled those first trash pulls just a little bit differently. One Abomination in the first pull for Legendary, and then that one went into the second pull on the side of Perplexed. But I think what kind of lost them time was how they moved through it. So for Legendary, we did see these first couple of mobs before Archmage being played on their own before they went into the boss fight. And even though Perplexed did have a player go down here in this very difficult pull to try and get Witherbark started, it just wasn't enough. On the other side, we had 2 deaths come in on the end of this Cinderbolt storm here. You were talking about it, Tettles, I think, kind of healing out these stacks rather than using the Dwarf Racial, and I think like maybe there wasn't any healing left at that point. Players just too low, and unfortunately getting aced there by the boss definitely cost them a lot of time that they then needed to res as well. We did try to get a clip of this to show you. So there is a Shine's pet just kind of coming through the wall there and dragging in all of these extra petals, making sure, like you said, you're spending that time on the boss anyway. You're just standing around, might as well add some trash. And I thought this was pretty crazy, honestly. The way Perplexed moved through this boss fight, first of all pulling everything onto the boss fight, and then during that boss fight they added even more casters that needed interrupts and all of that. Very high difficulty, able to pull it off super cleanly, and I think that's what kind of done Legendary in for in the end.
I'm interested in seeing like other teams go up against Perplexed and Everbloom. Whenever we saw Bald Bandits in here earlier, they had a 12-minute and 47-second run, and I think that run from Perplexed was like 13:24. So I'm really interested in seeing like how Everbloom evolves. Are any teams going to actually kind of pick up what Bald Bandits are doing and going to be able to shave off somewhere in the order of 30 or 40 seconds off of their runs to be able to compete with that time?
I suppose we'll find out. But for now, it seems like Perplex continues to be a big threat. Tomorrow's games are going to be amazing in the upper bracket, actually. That is going to be extremely spicy. But the lower bracket gets scary too, right? Because you have a team like Legendary going down there, and I don't know. It's you know, it's one of those things where you get to this point in the tournament, Dratnos, and you know, you ask yourself, like, when these two teams match up, you know, is the team coming in with a theoretical disadvantage? You know, is there that much more they can do to catch up at this point?
Yeah, I mean, we have had across MDI history, we've had teams that have been like high potential but high volatility teams, and then we've had teams that have been just like extreme consistent performers. And this weekend's bracket, I mean, seeing these teams play up against each other, it's kind of revealed to me that the level of competition has just moved to a point where that's kind of not true anymore. We just have teams that are just good at everything and really, really, really good playing against each other, and you know, one death or two deaths in some one boss fight, and you're just going to lose because the other team is not going to make a mistake like that.
Did any of you guys pick Perplexed to win?
I picked them to go second. Yeah,
I picked them to win
too. Yeah.
Oh wow.
Wow.
Ooh.
I'm feeling.
Yeah.
I'm
Oh
feeling
wow, we all picked
okay.
Perplexed to win or go second, pretty much.
Pretty much, yeah.
I'm feeling okay about them. They looked really good there.
Makes, do you have
Now, Makes.
you have a little bit of
That's
Makes.
Now,
Okay,
can you explain
listen.
how you picked two teams as your
How
champion?
did you pick two teams to win?
Is that what you're
Yeah.
allowed to do if you don't pick Echo? You can pick two of them?
So I think today is a special day, and I'm allowed to use
Oh.
fusion as like my extra power.
Oh,
So
yeah.
this is my tribute. Yeah, no, I just both of these teams always ask me like, who am I predicting? And I couldn't let them down, and I kind of had to fit Echo in there as well. So really, I'm just trying not to get flamed by the teams.
You have to tell them, hey, we zoom in. I like that it zoomed in and said, hey. You have to tell them, I'm a professional World of Warcraft analyst, and I gotta call them like I see them. So if you don't like my calls, well, get good. You gotta be harsh.
Instead of
You gotta
trying to go for
understand.
6 different teams, I just picked Perplexed straight up.
It was hard. It was really hard.
As a matter of fact,
but,
I'll take the field. That's a good point.
I mean, that's the Dratno strategy, as we've learned earlier. I'm sure we'll see the screen get modified throughout the weekend. You know?
Oh yeah, I've got plans for that already. If things
Yeah,
start
I
looking
mean-
bad for Echo or Perplexed, but you know, I'm feeling pretty good so far. I'm feeling pretty good so far, and of course, a lot of us had a similar thought here. Tettles, you think they're gonna come out on top though over Echo?
I don't know. I mean, we'll see. They looked better in their first series.
They did look really good. Yeah, and Echo looked vulnerable. I mean, that's a very fair shout.
sure.
The first series for Echo was uncharacteristically weak from them. So, of course, it still finished in a 2-0, but, you know, there were signs of humanity out of a team that often looks inhumanly good. So, yeah, we'll see how, I guess, the rest of the weekend goes. The thing about Echo is that sometimes they trick you on Friday and Saturday into thinking that they're beatable, and then they show up on Sunday and they remind you that they're not. We'll see if that is
true.
the story again this weekend.
Yeah.
I mean, the last couple of MDIs as well, they've had about 40% of the best times done on broadcast for dungeons. And if they have that again, it kind of just depends on where Perplexed splits are for some of their timers and some of their keys. Like that Echo and that Black Rook maybe looked unbeatable, but in the Rise, it looked like they could potentially lose. Maybe Perplexed does better in some other dungeons. It really just kind of depends on how much practice and what strat innovation you were really able to come up with coming into the global finals. And there's nobody holding any punches now. I don't think any strats are being held.
I'm actually surprised that nobody picked Bandits, to be honest. I do understand why Perplexed is like the majority vote, but I felt like they would have been a good choice for kind of as a surprise runner-up. They've been looking really, really good all throughout their group weekend, and we just saw them beat the DAWGS in what I felt was pretty dominating play coming into this tournament. And the DAWGS were also a team people were really excited about. So definitely, I feel like there's a chance.
It's definitely a weekend where anything is possible when it comes to results. Like at the end of the day, this is a bracket that is going to be incredibly hard to call compared to a lot of previous MDI seasons. So, you know, we can make assumptions. But I've always said, like, until Echo starts losing, I can't pick them to not go first. You know, they have to prove to me that they won't go first before I start to predict someone else. Maybe that happens.
Understandable, honestly.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's very understandable.
Yeah, call them like I've seen them. But on the other side, I mean, I think Perplexed just had such a good run through Group B, you know, that I feel like they come into it hotter than the other teams. But that said, we've got a lot of teams that could contest them, including our two in the next match too. Last Hope versus Mandatory. We'll get to that series in just a moment. But before we do, oh yes, you know what time it is. Time for another dungeon map movements, and it could be apparently from any Dragonflight MDI season at all. So get ready. Pretty much all bosses are on the table at this point.
We're not getting season 2 like TGP movement maps, right? We're getting. Is it just MDI?
Who's to say? Could be anything.
We're told you might. So is it Blight of Galakron?
It's going to be
Ancient Protectors,
Razan.
or Iridacron, Lord and Lady Waycrest?
So these are all this season at least.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
All right, so we're starting off with a little bit of movement. We have one person separate from the rest of the group as well. That's kind of doing their own thing. And then somebody comes to join them. I'm starting to think this is Blight of Galakron. I don't know about...
Oh, you
Yeah, I
dropped
think so too. That was the debuff
like a little
juggle.
trait of the
Yeah.
debuff.
Oh,
And,
sure.
Okay, what's that person
What's
doing
that
there?
person
Hang on.
doing? Yeah,
Why'd that person go on an
back.
adventure?
All right.
That doesn't... Hang on, maybe that's Lord and Lady Waycrest. Maybe they were... No, well, okay. A lot of adventures are happening now.
You have to go far away, apparently.
Okay, maybe this is
hits
Ancient
Matron
Protectors?
Alma? No.
Maybe it's Ancient Protectors because we were grabbing some trash, and then also we're... Well, why is everybody moving?
That's true.
Why would they be moving? I
I feel like it's Lord and Lady is what I would guess, but I don't feel good about it.
don't feel
So for
great about
Lord
Lord and
I
Lady
mean, there's
Waycrest.
a lot of stutter stepping, right?
Well, wait, we got.
Oh, is that
You
an
know what?
evoker? Oh, that means it has to be Ancient Protectors, right?
I'm gonna abstain.
What's it gonna be?
Oh, yeah, no,
You
Ancient
can't
Protectors.
abstain?
Ancient
You
Protectors.
can't do
I'll go Ancient Protectors. Sure.
Okay.
Yeah,
it's,
it literally has
all
to be
right,
Ancient
yeah,
Protectors
it is.
because that's the AUG 4 DPS comp.
Oh, there
which
you
makes
go.
sense.
Yep, it's happening. Yeah. Well, we got there. We got there in the end.
I mean, once they
That's a
showed us the
nasty
comp, it was over.
Yeah, that was. I was gonna stick with my abstention, except for the evoker. Logic was really good.
We gotta not show the comp. I think. I feel like that does give away a lot in a season with some 4 DPS comps coming through. We don't see the Restoration Evoker anymore.
You mean Preservation?
We'll see what we preservation. That's what I mean. Yeah, we'll see what we get. We'll see what we get for the next one here. But for now, thanks again for powering this, for giving us a power to show it. Warcraft logs, appreciate it. Yeah, archon.gg/wow. Go check it out. There's not an exclamation point after that sentence. Facetiously, it means
Well, that's why
as
it's
exciting as it says.
The URL's not blue. It's an addition, right? That's why it's white.
Yeah. Well, it also just signifies excitement. That's the point of the
What's going
exclamation
on
point.
here?
That's
Yeah.
a great point.
Yeah, you're right. We don't need to go any farther than that. And we probably should stop there. Let's go to a break, and when we come back, we'll have our 4th match of the day. It's going to be Last Hope versus Mandatory, and it is mandatory that you stick around and watch that. I'm just going to end it there. Go to commercial. We're gone. All right, welcome to the Mythic Dungeon International. Our final series of the day is upon us. Your host, Doe, here, along with Tunnels, Dratnos, and Zyronic, and we are about to witness Last Hope versus Mandatory. Last Hope came in second in Group A, did very well against, they got 3-0'd by Echo, but they did really well up until that point, and they still put together some pretty competitive dungeons, so definitely a scary force to be reckoned with. And Mandatory, I feel like, is a team that, although they made it through to the global finals, we've been expecting a little bit more from them. I feel like a little bit tighter, cleaner. Mandatory will be a force to be reckoned with here in the global finals now. What do you think? Who wants to weigh in first on this one?
I guess I'll take it first. I felt like, for me personally, I don't know how the other people on the desk feel, but for me personally, I felt like Last Hope was probably the most consistent team that we saw across all cup play.
Yeah.
Now, the downside of that, I don't think they had like super fast strats in any particular dungeon. And while consistent play is something that we definitely praise from time to time, you're going to have to be able to come up with consistent and fast play to be able to win the MDI. And then for Mandatory, I think there were a lot of questions as to kind of like the opposite, like why is Mandatory not consistent? They had probably the fastest strats in their entire group weekend, but they were not consistent with any of them, and that ended up pushing them to get the third seed out of Cup A. And so I think that this is going to be like a really strong test for both of these teams, kind of showing how their prep and how their practice went. And I don't know how Dratnos and Zyro feel, but that's kind of how I feel about these two teams.
Yeah, I feel like Mandatory have been that team that, has really, really looked sketchy in some of their runs. And, obviously they are a really high potential team, but last series, I was talking about how it looked like we were kind of past that era of there being some inconsistent teams. Mandatory are the exception, at least given their last weekend, was that they were that team that was just horrendously inconsistent. Now, that was a cup. This is the global finals. It is I'm sure something that they have been trying to remove as a characteristic of their team over the past few weeks. So we'll see how that ends up shaking out, as both teams have decided to remove the Everbloom from contention here, which means Galakron's Fall is also gone, and we will be seeing Blackrook and Murazan's Rise for sure, followed by a Darkheart Thicket Decider if we need one in this series. Starting off with Blackrook, though, it should be an interesting one here between these two teams. I feel like that is that's a good spot to be Last Hope, because there's a lot of these pretty scary pulls that, talking about Last Hope as a hyper-consistent team, I don't think that this is one of those dungeons where you're hoping to get an edge by having a faster strat. I think it's one of those dungeons where you're hoping to be able to survive some pretty dangerous pulls, and I think that's a Last Hope specialty.
Well, there's an interesting... speaking of the Blackrock hold, there's actually an interesting concept we can talk about here, because these teams knew they were going to be the last on today. It's been about 2.5 hours since we saw the snap pull from Echo. If these teams have been practicing the Rise snaps, this snap is pretty similar, so it wouldn't, be too out of the question for one of the teams to maybe have cooked something up and try to do something similar to what we saw from Echo in this dungeon.
We also have a decent amount of 4 DPS dungeons in this pool, and so I think that that's also going to be increased volatility for both of these two teams. Both Rise and Blackrock Hold have been shown as 4 DPS, heavily shown as 4 DPS candidates by teams earlier today.
Another good thing with Last Hope coming into this too, the only team I believe that had 2 or less deaths in every dungeon, despite getting like a 3-0. They, like Garnos mentioned, they've been very consistent.
Yeah.
Well, we were going to go into game, but unfortunately an Infernal pulled his soul right as they were about to start the key, so we have a little bit more time to sit here and talk.
Oh, no.
Woo!
I'll own up to
Just,
that.
All right.
Just Warlock things. Well,
I feel like
ban
critters
warlocks.
and neutral mobs need to be banned from being near the keystone font of power. Like,
Agreed.
okay,
Yeah.
before we go into game, I have a quick question for you guys. So we saw our predictions for the weekend, right? A lot of us said Perplexed and Echo in some order, right? I think Mix was the only one who didn't say that. But I have a question for you. Who would your third team be if we were asked for top 3 predictions?
Bald
Mine would be
Bandits.
Mandatory.
mine was Mandatory as well, yeah. I actually sent in my top 4 because that's what we did over the
too.
Cup weekend. So I had Mandatory in 3rd, but I had Last Hope in 4th. So
Same.
I think that this is a really, really tightly matched series.
I
I would have
Last
taken
Hope in
Bald
3rd.
Bandits, man. Am I weird?
Yeah, Bald Bandits look
They were
really
my
good.
4th.
And Bald Bandits and DAWGS also looked really good.
That's the
And
thing,
Eclipse
right?
and,
Like, outside of the outside of Echo and maybe Perplexed as the clear number 2 right now, I think every other team has, their own strengths and weaknesses that could qualify them in being into that number 3 or number 4 spot, right? We haven't really seen, like, another team really be that standout team. Obviously, Bald Bandits looked really good last series, but until we see Last Open Mandatory here, it's going to be hard to really place the rest of the teams.
Yeah, we'll know more coming into tomorrow after this series, I think. But yeah, Bald Bandits definitely standing out here, and like I said, I think Last Hope is going to really impress. Maybe I'm host cursing them. Maybe I can't caster curse them this time, but I don't want to host curse them either. But I did have them third for my my top 4, so we'll see. They looked really good in Group A, so.
I mean, they said that they were a bit inconsistent coming into Cup play, and then they showed that. But coming into Global Finals, they said that they've kind of fixed all of the problems that they were having. Now, what's the reality of that situation? I guess we're really about to see here. In this first series, I think that this is going to set the tone, I think, for Mandatory this weekend and how I feel about them.
Well, we're going to find out as soon as Infernal stop fighting things at the start of the dungeon.
All right, we're actually going to get to see a peek behind the curtain. I'm hearing here we're gonna actually see the countdowns from both teams. So if you ever wonder what it looks like when you're waiting for an admin to start your key in an MDI setting, this is going to be a really exciting game for you, because that is exactly what's going to happen here. It's so cool, the Tournament Realm setup, like playing on these keys with the admins, running the keys, and then the other thing they don't tell you is at the end of the run, you kill the last boss, and you're kind of just waiting for the admins to say, like, you won or you lost. And sometimes, like, you have 5 deaths and you kill the last boss, and they don't say anything because, of course, you're waiting for the death timer to catch back up, and that can be some of the most nerve-wracking 25 seconds of your life.
You know, another funny behind the curtain thing is, like, these teams are also in, like, a raid group with the observers. Yeah. And so you have to, like, set up your UI completely differently, because there's, like, a lot of weak auras that just don't work in raid groups, so you have to, fix those to make sure they work in raid groups. A lot of people's party frames would be misaligned, so these teams have to really have a specific UI set up.
Oh, here we go.
Here we go.
Look at the countdowns. Last Hope already has 100% count. Oh, man.
That's really good.
How do they do it?
That's a sizable advantage here
it's
for
a nice
Last
start
Hope.
for them, yeah.
Oh, here goes 15.
Oh, here's the countdowns.
Wow.
Okay.
And you can see how well synced they are as well. Like, pretty close between the two teams. 7. About to get underway here.
Countdown together. 3, 2.
And here come the Infernals.
1.
The pre-pot static discharge potions.
All right, the keys are good. Let's go.
All right, now this is the part where we would usually tune in to the runs. But yeah, it's Black or Cold. Both teams heading off over to the right-hand side to get things started. We've seen the interesting part of the dungeon. We'll switch back over to the flyover now.
I think
here they go.
The sequencing is a little out of order there, but we're good to go. We only missed a little bit of the run, but here we go. Similar strategies to what we've seen in the past. Every single mob on the right side of the first part of the dungeon being dragged behind the teams as they make their way towards the Amalgam of Souls. It's just going to be a DPS race to try to burst this boss down so you don't get any bad overlaps of boss damage plus trash damage. The big things to look out for are those soul blasts coming out of the trash mobs. That plus any extra damage from the boss could be a one-shot like we've seen so many times in previous weekends.
Yeah, this is a very, very dangerous pull. There's just no way around it, though. If you try to do this any slower, you're giving up so much time. So both teams are just going for the entire pull here. Of course, we've got those Ret Pallies as well with their snazzy legendary weapons filling in for that healer role here. You can see Mandatory have come to a slight early lead, but it's almost 0, right? Both teams, in fact, trading leads on boss HP at this point, as we now have these souls coming in towards the boss here. It is a 24 tyrannical, so you actually can't allow all of them to reach the boss. And you can see Last Hope are going to use Blast Wave with big Blast Wave talented into it to be able to keep those mobs from actually getting into the boss. Once Amalgam is pressed to 14 or 15% health, it just explodes immediately and all the souls despawn. So that's all you have to stall for. Both teams able to get through that. A couple defensive used, but nothing too serious. But actually, it's going to be our first death here. Stove going down for Mandatory to that Soul Burst. That is very much not good, because in addition to Stove going down, we've also seen Crims popping that Cauterize as well.
The other big thing to pay attention to is the HP pool for the trash mobs. Last Hope already have killed off Lady Valandris, whereas Mandatory still have to chew through that HP bar. Now, of course, Last Hope still has to wait the 30 seconds for this door to open, so Mandatory can potentially kill off this trash mob and get through the door at the same time, but if they do have to sit around here and finish this off, it could be a time loss for them. Okay, never mind. They're going to be good. Last Hope still, however, did kill the boss off first, so that door's going to open up more quickly for them, and they're going to, maintain a pretty decent advantage. 10 seconds already at the first boss for them. Can they open that gap up even further? In our first run earlier today, we saw every single trash mob here being pulled all the way to the end of the hallway. Our Last Hope going to be doing the same thing.
Yeah, Last Hope are on the move, that is for sure. And it looks like they are not showing any signs of stopping so far. Dorky charging forwards and grabbing every single enemy in this area. Goop and Cryptics a little bit more cautious here, standing behind a pillar for line of sight until these mobs are under control. You gotta be very careful as well. Whenever your tank is trying to group this many mobs, if you start hitting too early, you're gonna rip threat off of one of them, and that is gonna just grief your possibilities of getting the pull under control with any degree of speed. So it's another one of those cases where going slow is actually the faster way to get these pulls together. Last Hope just blasting full AoE damage into this. Drogo on that Rep Pally just doing some tremendous damage here. Really powerful spec to one that as well, I don't think he was ready to play this in their Cup weekend, right? That was something that Last Hope didn't have access to, but he has picked that up and now is showing some mastery with it as they are in their finals weekend.
Yeah, kind of surprising to me personally. I've always known Drogo as both a tank and a healer player, but I guess in the past he has played like mage as far as a DPS player goes, so it should come to him pretty naturally. You can see topping the meters for them here, which actually allows Goop to hold on to the Infernal cooldown. Now on the other side, Maesting didn't use his Infernal either, so they'll still have both of those available for whatever they happen to go for next, which is going to be the boss pull with the 3 trash mobs on top of it. But man, the difference in progression here in the dungeon is wild. Last Hope, they must have killed the mobs in a certain order. They're killing the last pack first so that it spawned the mini-boss first. And Mandatory must not have done that because Last Hope, they've opened up the gap even more now. They're on the boss a good 15-20 seconds ahead of Mandatory.
Yeah, because if you look at that boss 1 split, right, it's only a 10-second advantage for Last Hope, but absolutely, it's something like 20 seconds now is the lead for Last Hope, not to mention the 5 seconds of death timer, which aren't included in that. So Last Hope, with a lead that I would never describe as comfortable. Nothing in this game is ever comfortable, but it is something that they certainly have a noticeable lead at this point, and if they can keep that damage priority going well, if I think that's something that Last Hope has always struck me as being really good at is, teams, there are some teams where their skill set is figuring out which pulls you can do and what tech you can deploy, but something that I think Last Hope is really good at is identifying which mob we should be targeting and how much we should be doing as a percent of our damage to the priority target in a given pull to make the dungeon faster, right? That's a really underrated skill that I do think Last Hope are one of the teams that excel at it.
Yeah, absolutely. You're 100% correct. And you can see, I mean, the 10% boss advantage has stayed relatively even this entire time. Both teams outputting extremely similar amounts of overall single target damage. Red's still topping for Last Hope, though. Drogo doing a ton of damage here. But as we both know, this next pull is really a make-or-break section of the dungeon. And I imagine without a Moonkin, neither of the teams are going to be going for that massive snap pull that we saw for Echo earlier on today. That Ursul's Vortex was really a really important tool for making sure the mobs are stacked together so that everything got hit by the Flame Sigil. So I don't imagine we're going to see that. I think we're going to see something we saw during the Cup weekends where that entire hallway of Scavengers and Tricksters and Blade Lords is pulled in one single pull, and they're just going to blast it down with AoE. Now, they don't have any major cooldowns for that, right? The Infernal's on cooldown from the boss here. They don't even have Combust for it. They don't have PI for it. It's just going to be raw AoE damage from the groups that are going to burst this down.
Yeah, I mean, it is a 24, which is a fairly high key level to be attempting that, but the good news for them is that none of the affixes will interfere too much with it, right? It's not a bolstering or a sanguine or a bursting, any of those other affixes that we had in some of our group weekends in this dungeon. So, yeah, both teams actually getting underway here, and I mean, I feel like we may have spoken too soon about Last Hope having a lead here as well, because look at the Boss 2 split now. Mandatory actually were much faster on that Boss 2 split. Somehow, we're just able to do so much more damage to that boss. As I was praising Last Hope's, priority damage focus, something has gone wrong for them, or something has gone very right for Mandatory, as the two teams are now basically tied working on this trash pull.
we go. AoE blasting now. Got to keep an eye on these spiteful shades as they start to come out. The main damage health bar that you have to look at is going to be the tanks for both teams, getting destroyed by the brutal assaults from these Blade Lords. If the tank stays alive, the rest of the team should be fine. Cauterized pop for Cryptics, though, must have had aggro on one of the mobs there. Good knockback on the shades to make sure nobody gets hit, and both teams are through this pull relatively clean, but Mandatory still with a very slight lead from that extra burst of single target DPS they got at the end of the second boss.
Yeah, they are, I mean, neck and neck, I think, is the only way to describe it here, because those 5 seconds of death timer still are working against Mandatory and in favor of Last Hope. Let's see how they decide to pull this section of the dungeon as well. It's going to be Mandatory actually a lot faster in getting through this, right? Hitting their invis pots, grouping up, and running through. Last Hope, though, right behind as well, setting up for the same kind of idea here. Gatewaying through. And 1, 2, 3. I mean, yeah, this with those death timers, it is exactly tied here between these two teams. This is just going to be such a tight race to the finish line. There's really only one pull left after this as well, right? It's the last boss pull with all that trash onto it too, so this is going to be unbelievably close. Last Hope need to find the damage here. They need to not have what happened to them on that second boss happen to them on either of these next two bosses, where Mandatory just do more damage than them.
Let's look at the single target damage profiles here for both teams. It's just going to be, I mean, we do have a little bit of cleave damage on the Dominators plus the Fellbats as they were pulled in, but the single target damage is going to be really, really important. Mandatory with a 10% boss damage lead here. You can see the majority of the single target damage is coming out from the Warlocks after the fact, because they just have very consistent damage. Also, they gained a lot from the trash being on the boss for a while. Those extra immolates refreshing your Dimensional Rift charges, very, very useful for consistent single target damage here. Last Hope, though, very slightly pulling it back here. We're now sub 10% in the 7 to 8% range. They need to keep pushing forward, though. Because Mandatory, I mean, we only have one pull left in this dungeon, Dratnos, and I mean, we've seen how wrong it can go, but we've also seen how right it can go, right? Also, I mean, another really important thing is with this 4 DPS comp, the teams are obviously going to try to one-phase it here. If either of the teams fails to do that, they pretty much lost the series outright with how close it is.
Yeah, that is a vital part of the strat for both teams here is going to be securing that one phase. And honestly, it's going to be securing that one phase without giving up too much as well, right? Without, pushing the phase one of the boss too slowly. Oh, look at Last Hope's raid frames, though. They've been hit by an incorporeal debuff on their entire group here. That is minus 50% damage for them for 10 seconds. And that is going to be just brutal here. We can see now 13 seconds in favor of Mandatory. 5 seconds of that are fake because of death timers, so that means 8 seconds in favor of Mandatory. This is going to come right down to the wire as Last Hope now heading up those stairs as well. Mandatory grouping up the mobs, and they just need to get in combat with the last boss here as soon as possible, right away, wasting no time. Mandatory do get that fight started. 10 seconds until their lust is available. Almost certainly it needs to be used to secure that one phase, but Last Hope are hot on their heels. Last Hope also pulling the boss here. Lust becoming available for them soon as well. This is going to be just about damage, and of course, if anybody dies, it is going to be over for that team.
Just need to burst down Kurtalos as quickly as possible. Mandatory have done just that, already pushed the boss here. Now it's just about maintaining on these trash ads here. You don't want your tank to go down. You want to make sure you get them down efficiently with your AoE damage. Last Hope, though, looks like they're focusing way more on their AoE damage. This boss isn't pushing nearly as quickly for them as it did for Mandatory. They're taking a lot of time to push this into Phase 2, and Mandatory's gap has only widened here. Already onto Dantalian Axe here. The first Shadow Ball volley is going out. Do they get the meld? No, they don't. So the damage buff is coming a little late for them, and they don't extend the phase anymore at all.
And they're not going to hit the lust as well.
One phase. No, they're not.
Lust is going to be hit by. So Last Hope are going for the one phase, and Mandatory are not. Even though Mandatory were so far ahead here, this one phase opportunity for Last Hope is their way back into this game. If they can kill Dantalian Axe before it enters that Dreadlord's Guile phase, something that Mandatory didn't really attempt here, then Last Hope will be able to get back into it. Smacked is down. That is going to be just devastating for Last Hope here. He's going to lose his Bloodlust. He does get, at least his Power Infusion wasn't pressed yet, so at least he'll be able to have Power Infusion here, but I feel like the damage is just so tight on this check. You can see Last Hope going for it now. Mandatory are going to hit their lust as well and start burning down the boss, but yeah, Last Hope just going to be 36%. I mean, not even particularly close. not even clear if it's doable here on 24 Tyrannical to really accomplish that with any degree of consistency, but certainly not with a death and a res being needed. So Mandatory will be able to get over the finish line here first. 10% on Dentalian Axe. Beautiful run here from both teams. Just a death apiece, but Last Hope's going to be proving a little bit more costly. Mandatory take a lead in the series, 1-0.
Wow, what a great dungeon to start this series off with. Mandatory getting the win, pulling ahead, and Last Hope, it seemed like they maybe had a chance at the end, but yeah, that one death just unsmacked, derailed the whole thing. And now I mean it. I really mean it now. We're going to see 3 dungeons in the series. I'm confident.
You mean it now?
I really mean it now.
No takesies, backsies.
No takesies, backsies, no reversal. No, it's happening.
I think his fingers were crossed whenever he said that, chat. You guys can't see
We're
it, but
not.
I can
You
see
can
him on
put me
camera.
on camera right now. My fingers are not crossed.
No. This is the time that we're looking at the run, man. All right, so as we can see right here, Last Hope, I felt like made up a lot of time. Like you guys were calling out on the cast, they were somewhere in the order of about 20 seconds ahead of Mandatory going into the second boss, and a lot of it came down to this trash pull. Like you guys were talking about, they had a really good ability to be able to kill off all of the trash mobs that were from the pack that start CRP, and you can see that the remaining trash mobs that they have are like the Rook Spiderlings and stuff like that, like stuff that they don't really care about. It's not actually slowing down the progression in the dungeon. But Mandatory really turned on the jets on this boss, were able to kill off this boss at about the same time. And at this point, there was only like a 5-second death differential that separated these two teams. And I thought it was going to come down to this incorporeal that we're going to see here in a couple of seconds for Last Hope. They have an incorporeal that just goes off the very end of Smash Bite, and it kind of halts their progress at being able to kill the boss. They're stuck at 6% for a while. They kind of have to wait for this 50% damage debuff to fade before they're really able to get this boss killed off. And this probably cost them somewhere in the order of about 8 to 10 seconds, being able to get this boss killed off a little bit slower than where Mandatory were. I thought there was a chance they were going to be able to one-face the boss. After having seen it end at 35%, I don't think Smack's death really affects that push by 35%.
I mean, but they lusted like they were going for it, right? Like,
okay, so do they
I guess
beat it in
maybe you're just hitting that
practice?
lust because you're doing more than half of the boss's health there, and so you may as well. But I feel like that's what their design was.
I don't know. I think you're probably right, but it's at the same point, because that phase only lasts somewhere like 35 to 40 seconds. I guess you just have to press the lust there anyways. Your Void Eruption isn't going to last that entire phase either. So I think you maybe just rip it.
Yeah, maybe it's just speculative, right? Maybe if you get a lot of crits, right? You crit all your Chaos Bolts, and then you think you're going to be able to get it pushed if that happens. But otherwise, it's still just a good lust.
Yeah.
Well, optimism never really hurting anyone, right?
Mandatory looked pretty good there. They had a 12:15 Blackrook hold run. The fastest Blackrook we saw earlier was Echo with an 11:57. I think if Mandatory has a perfect run, they can probably put up an 11:57. Now it does require a perfect run for them with basically zero wiggle room. But this is the Mandatory that we were talking about needing to see to really be confident in them moving forward into this tournament. They looked okay, so I guess we're gonna see how they fare in Map 2, which is going to Rise, I think.
Well, now we get to test that consistency a little bit, right? Which what we were talking about earlier. Now they have the chance to prove that the consistency issues are not an issue anymore, at least not for this series anyway, where, if that starts to creep back in, then we could see that third dungeon. But Mandatory has the lead. They've got the chance to prove it at least. And our next dungeon, I'm trying to remember which one we're going to now. It's going to be Rise. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. So another opportunity to see how the tech that Echo showed us all has been incorporated.
What do you guys think about Ret Paladin versus Moonkin versus Augurevoker for 4th DPS options?
Ooh. I think it's like a dungeon tech specific thing, right? Like in terms of like raw damage for burst, Aug is definitely the best. For utility, I like Ret the most, but like specifically for certain things, like obviously Blackrook Hold, it looks like Boomkin's probably the best option if you're able to do that snap onto Smash Bite. It's just I think you need the Vortex to make that pull work.
Okay.
Mark of the Wild is pretty good too, though, man. I think for Moonkin and Red, it's probably pretty close. It's just like a dungeon tech sort of thing.
Janos, you have any thoughts?
I like the safety brought by the Augurevoker as well. I feel like that is a benefit of that spec. And I do think the damage of the Aug Evoker is also going to be really potent as well, because you're buffing, a Shadow Priest and a Destro Lock in their cooldowns, right? Or like a Mage and a Destro Lock in their cooldowns, right? And that is always, you're going to be lining up your buffs with power infusions on people as well. That seems really, really strong to me. So I've liked the Aug Evoker when we've seen that so far, but I mean, I agree with Zyra, right? It's going to be dungeon by dungeon. You're going to be testing it all out and just going with whichever is fastest.
Well, I think we'll find out pretty soon. We did see 2 balanced druids earlier in the day, if I remember correctly. Our first time on Murazan's Rise during our first series of the day. So a chance to do something a little bit differently. Have we seen all 3 of those on this dungeon in the MDI so far? I'm trying to recall.
All 3 of
All 3 of the
and...
4th DPS options.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I don't think we've seen I guess we saw Balance and Rise today. Never mind.
Yeah,
we did.
Yeah. And we saw a little bit of balance last cup as well, in Group B Cup, although
it was in fall, I think. I don't think
it was in fall.
necessarily
Yeah,
in Rise.
That's what I was wondering, is if we've seen all 3 in this dungeon specifically. And I'm not so sure
so
we have yet.
for time trials, Aug Evoker was played almost exclusively.
we even saw Feral Druid as well. Zalia put up the best time in this dungeon on a Feral Druid too. So that's something we have yet to see on broadcast, but that could be really cool.
Would you ever play Aug in here for Raging? For the first area?
Yeah.
That sounds
I
great.
like that.
Augmentation Evoker is so good at raging, right? Because you've got your overawed dispel that it just clears the raging off of all the mobs when you press it. It's so good.
Do you need the AoE raging for anything in particular in this dungeon, though? Wouldn't a Moonkin just single target Soothe be fine for most things? Because I mean, you're really only worried about the mages in the first area, right?
That's what I was going to say. It's the mages in the first area. By soothing them, they're able to actually get killed off by the Maiden Orb. Whenever they're affected by Raging, they're actually not able to get damaged by that orb that she shoots out. I don't think you need it for anything realistically in here outside of the mages. But it's not bad. Like, you're not unhappy to have it. I think it's one of those things that, like, you're never upset at the AoE Soothe for the first couple of pulls. It's going to increase your tank survivability. Especially since they're doing such a large pull. Could be a bit sketchy.
Yeah, I think the thing in particular that actually makes the Moonkin more and more and more valuable to me as I think about it, like, Beam is really, really good for locking down outside of Silent Sigils, right? And just for AoE lockdowns. Obviously, Druid brings Mark of the Wild. And also, the thing is, when you're running no healer, having extra off heals is really nice, and Nature's Vigil has been kind of insane whenever it's used on pulls where you take a lot of damage, right? Like, I remember when we're seeing fall keys with the Moonkin or a Feral Druid, we were seeing a ton of healing coming out from the Nature's Vigil. So, yeah, I think in general, the more I think about it, the more I like Moonkin. And I mean, you know me, right? Like, if I can make an excuse to say bad things about Moonkin, I'll do it. But I like it more and more now for the 4 DPS comp.
I was going to say, we need to clip when Zyronic says, the more I think about it, the more I like Moonkin, and just take that in isolation and just... You know, you can get a lot of use out of that, I think, in future seasons. Yeah, it's already clipped. If you haven't clipped it out there, you should. You should. That's some gold. Yeah, save that for a rainy day. Yeah. Well, I like the Aug Evokers for all the disruption, too, you know? You have a lot of ways to deal with a lot of annoying casts and things like that. And that's always... I feel like that's a concern in, like, every dungeon in MDI. It's never rough.
Yeah.
Never a bad decision.
I do share the conclusion that, like, you don't need the AoE Raging Dispel, you don't need all of those effects. Like, you can find a way to do it without it, but it is really nice. Like, it makes it a lot easier to just be able to have that be something you can rely on, rather than something that you're, really trying to make sure that you have defensives and stuff for the end of the pull, or you're killing mobs at certain times, right?
Yeah.
I will say, I think the most likely thing here, though, is that both Mode and Drogo only practice Ret Paladin.
Well,
oh wow, Drogo's on a boomy?
Go.
This is insane. And Mode's on a boomy. Well. All right, I just made stuff up. It's fine though.
Absolutely, yeah. Just
they were listening to me.
Immediate backtracking by me, by the way.
Absolutely.
He loves Moonkin. We know this about Zyronic, you know?
The camera goes up and Tettles is just proved wrong in record time at the start of the dungeon. That is really good, as we are underway here in Murazan's Rise, plus 23 Tyrannical Raging Storming. And everything is getting grouped up here for a massive Bloodlust pull for both teams here. Last Hope are in danger of being sent to the lower bracket if this game does not go their way. Mandatory, of course, with that lead in the series. So very important game here if you're a Last Hope fan. This is a big deal for them. They've got to clutch this one out.
Last Hope has dealt with this trash pack insanely quickly. One of the things I liked that they did there is when the Orb of Contemplation came out, we saw the Grip Sigil coming out from Dorky to make sure every single one of those mobs got double hit by the Orb there. Beautiful execution of the dungeon mechanics there. Mandatory not too far behind, though, and they actually pulled a little bit of extra trash in their first pull as well, so that might have compensated for the extra pull timer for them, though. Both teams now moving off to the edge to grab a couple of extra mobs to pull into the boss here, and even more mobs coming in. That's a couple extra mages that they'll have to worry about as well. It's going to be a tough pull, but they should be able to make it work with the Moonkin on their team.
Yeah, Last Hope are going to be engaging tier about 2 seconds ahead of Mandatory, but like you said, Mandatory with substantially more count here. They were able to activate the boss really quickly. They were focusing on the mobs that did that, and they grabbed a bunch of trash, but Last Hope have a bunch of trash in here on this pull as well. They also have some friends mass-rooted out at the side there that they'll be able to bring in later, so even more count will be doable, but they just don't want to deal with it right now.
I just realized Drogo is Feral, not Moonkin. Interesting. So we get the Feral Moonkin face-off. Interesting. Okay. I love the face-off we're getting here. Now we can find out which Druid spec is actually better. Both teams, though, 50% going into the first intermission phase. A little bit more single target damage from Mandatory. Actually, it's just neck and neck. Both teams 43% at the intermission? Okay, a little more for Mandatory, but it's still so close.
Yeah, so Feral Druid, I mean, this is our first time seeing Feral Druid in the MDI this season then. It's worth talking about it a little bit because Feral Druid was an MDI spec that we saw a ton of last MDI, right, during Season 1. But since then, it's been changed quite a bit in how it functions. Notably, you don't get nearly as many free Ferocious Bite procs in AoE as you used to. There's a sort of a square root scaling thing going on there to make that so you don't get as many. On the single target side of things, though, it's actually kind of a little bit fine. It's even maybe better. They've changed a lot about how the spec works, though, since then. Kind of fundamentally, it sort of got a redesign earlier, and in Mythic Plus, I would describe it as sort of a melee fire mage with how its damage profile works now, where you're doing a bunch of damage. Often you're kind of primary targeting something, and then you're also, if there's AoE happening, unlike a fire mage, you do actually press some different buttons, but you still have like that main thing that you're biting into, whereas and then everything else is sort of just getting the AoE from you.
What do you mean? Mage has a lot of different choices in their raid rotation. They can choose to either Pyroblast or Flame Strike.
That is true, and Feral does get the choice of spending on Primal Wraths or Bites as well, although the spamming of Primal Wrath has been something that has been nerfed a tremendous amount in the kit since Season 1, so Last Hope are going to be a tiny bit faster on actually getting this mini-boss killed, even though Mandatory were 3 seconds faster on their first boss split. Let's see if both teams will be able to execute this run properly. This is actually... I would not be surprised if this run here decides games in our MDI this weekend, because, it's a game of seconds, and making a mistake here can cost you a few seconds, and it feels silly. It feels like something that shouldn't matter as much, but it absolutely is. And yeah, we can see... Looks like Goop all the way back at the start once again here, trying to run through. Mandatory at least getting some of their members through. I see we have Cryptics through for Last Hope as well, but Goop going to get sent back to the front once again, and he is going to have to wait for this rift to be opened. It looks like on Mandatory's side, everybody is through. They're still going to open the rift to get that graveyard set up, but now they're able to just go straight into combat, so Mandatory gaining quite a bit of time here off of that. Yeah, I mean, when I say quite a bit of time, I mean 5 seconds. 5 seconds is now quite a bit of time for me.
Well, 5 seconds in addition to the 3 seconds from the first boss. I guess Last Hope caught up a little bit on the initial 2-pack right before the RP there. Goop got really unlucky. I don't know if you were watching his POV on the left there, but he was cutting across the left side, and he got completely cut off by frontal slams plus orbs and forced him to go back around, and then doubling back around through the middle is really annoying, especially when your teammates are also there baiting everything. So, yeah, he just got really, really, really unlucky. Of course, we know now from the very first rise that we saw earlier today that if a team does not click that orb for RP, you do not get the checkpoint here. You have to run back through the RP again in order to get here. We saw that happen. So, yeah, you do want to click that orb, so it really wasn't that big of a time loss. Last Hope, you're using the gateway to get across to this first portal instantly. This is a massive pull here. Double Rift Mage coming in, plus a ton of extra trash that's going to be doing a lot of AoE damage to the group. Look at the AoE damage as these temporal deviations start to explode on their team. This is with no healer, by the way, just getting carried by the power of the Vampiric Embrace and the Nature's Vigil. Man, lots of healing coming out from those two characters, adding up to over 250k HPS, keeping the team alive. As those have run out, though, now, they have to go a little bit slower, but they're not letting up, Dratnos. They're just pulling more and more. They're going to be relying essentially on Hellstones and a Dream to live through this.
Yeah, things are getting very, very tenuous as those massively powerful off-healer cooldowns have now expired. So, like you said, both teams just trying to keep themselves alive. But, Goop here, low on health, kind of just doesn't really have any options to keep himself alive. One of the nice things about Feral Druid, actually, is that every few globals, you do get a free regrowth if you want to use it. Of course, it is a little bit of a damage loss to be spamming those, but it is something you can do. Last Hope are going to be hitting their melds, heading towards that battlefield. Looks like Mandatory on the exact same idea here as well. Actually, not quite the exact same idea. We have 4 melds being used by Mandatory, only 3 by Last Hope. So maybe a different strategy being employed here. We'll have to see what exactly gets snapped where for both teams. This is, of course, one of the hardest parts for our observers to actually be able to show what's going on because it's all over the map. So we are going to see a Summoning Stone coming down here. Mandatory are fighting off 1 Rift Mage here. It is just Skylark here. I don't see anybody else with him. Everybody else meld on CD, so he's just going to get summoned. Why is he getting the Rift Mage so low here? What's the idea, I wonder?
Well, this is the one where he Shadow Melds it onto Mode, correct?
Okay.
Pretty sure?
So Mode is in combat with it still, and
yes.
Yeah, now he's going to meld it, and it's going to go over to Mode. Okay. And then he's going to be getting summoned.
If we can get a POV on Mode, that'd be great here. And Mode should be finishing off that on his own if we can get the POV over to Mode. Yeah, Skylar gets summoned to the team. They kill off the Rift Mage. Now Mode gets summoned. And they should have another Rift Mage with them at Battlefield if they're trying to do the exact same tech that Echo does as well. Just like Last Hope does. Yep, they have the Rift Mage with them now. This is perfect execution for Mandatory getting that down. Once this Rift Mage goes down, they'll have something connecting them over to Morchi's platform. And then once the next set of Farseers spawns, they'll be able to snap the Farseers and the Hunters over to Morchi. Can they get it down, though? Rift Mage is down. Everyone's going to go through the portal. Skylark will stay behind. He'll flame sigil the mobs, and then he'll take the portal out of combat. Same thing we see in Blackrock Hold, and we'll see him in a second here. Skylark will join the team, and we'll see those mobs from the battlefield, joining them perfectly. There it is. Same thing coming from Last Hope now on their end. Everyone's through the portal. They marked it to make sure nobody accidentally takes it. Where is Dorky? Has he come with them? Was he in combat? Taking a while for them.
He's very low health now. Is he going to be okay?
This is not ideal.
Okay, we can see a cheat death is now procced for Dorky. He does end up showing up, but yeah, that cheat death is not something that you're happy to see lost, but you're also not happy for those 5 extra seconds we spent there. Again, 5 seconds, a long time, as both teams are indeed on the Echo, original snap strategy. I got a little tricked into thinking that they were maybe trying something else, but no, they are indeed on the on this idea. Ooh, beautiful for Last Hope. One thing that has worked out really well for them is that Morchi is right where they were already fighting there when she split into all of her different forms. So that's going to be something that might allow Last Hope to accelerate a little bit. But you can see at the bottom of the screen there, Morchi 20% ahead for Mandatory.
Well, actually, Last Hope is going to catch up a lot here. Mandatory popped cooldowns on the pull. Last Hope waited until the first intermission phase to pop their cooldown, so Last Hope should be catching up a ton here. And you can see they were at least 25% behind a few seconds ago. That's dropped now down to 15%. However, they are entering the next intermission phase very shortly. Didn't catch up quite as much as I thought they would. But, a lot of this has to do with how much quicker Mandatory dealt with that RP, and then also, just how much quicker they dealt with the trash and not having to wait for their tank to pull the trash through, right? They saved a lot of time there. But it's all coming down to the small things, right? They're really just kind of piling up for Last Hope here. A few seconds here, a few seconds there has resulted in a pretty large gap for Mandatory.
Yeah, this is indeed an advantage that we'll be able to quantify with those split timers here at the bottom of the screen now. We'll be able to see just how much time Mandatory have gained. They were 3 seconds ahead out of the Boss 1 split. Their Boss 2 split is going to be faster as well. And Last Hope here actually going to be entering another Familiar Faces. And soon Morchi's going to split again if they're not careful. No, it's all right. Okay, Last Hope are going to be able to finish it off here. So they are 20 seconds slower on their Boss 2 split, plus 3 seconds slower on their Boss 1 split, equals 23 seconds. That is the advantage that Mandatory have built at this point. You can see that is also worth about half of Cramash Hellscream's health bar. But Last Hope have something to say about this. Last Hope are saying, you know what? Bloodlust. What do you think about that, Mandatory? We're going to hit our Bloodlust right now, and Mandatory do still mean then that they'll be able to save it for later in the dungeon, but Last Hope might be able to claw back some time here. This is a very common Bloodlust on live servers. This is just such a dangerous boss on the live servers that it's a really nice one to be able to have Bloodlust for, but it's a question to me of what is actually the fastest one if you're not as worried about that. I feel like this has got to be a pretty good one, though, because you just have such full uptime right now.
Yeah, I mean, this is a great use of Bloodlust, in my opinion. So much can go wrong here, right? The axe throwers do so much damage if they're not instantly dealt with. You can let a Warlock free cast far away. If Shockwave baits are bad, the boss can actually just straight up kill you with no healer. I think it's a totally fine lust, and it's completely caught them up here. Now, that being said, of course, Mandatory still do have the lust for either the next pull or the last boss here. This Worm Pad is actually really bad for Last Hope.
Tragic Penduels.
Yeah, this is really, really bad for them. They're losing at least 5-10 seconds here, which is pretty much eating up the advantage they got back from using that Bloodlust. Really, really unfortunate for them. I think Mandatory was dealing with a little bit of the same on their side, too, because they killed the boss at similar times, but still ever so slightly in the lead as they run towards the final trash pack of the dungeon.
Yeah, Mandatory are looking at something like a 15-second advantage, I would say, plus a Bloodlust. That Bloodlust is going to be worth a lot. That Bloodlust will probably turn into another 10 seconds or so somewhere. So I feel like Mandatory, are sitting on 20 to 30 seconds of lead. Although Last Hope actually are able to get Cryptics through very quickly to start the RP of this gateway activating. So not too far behind, maybe a little bit closer than I gave them credit for. This is still a very, very, very tight game, as both teams are now sending players to start the RP of spawning these dragons. The final trash pack of the dungeon will bring both teams up to 100%, and then they will just have the last boss as well. Very, very, very tense moment here.
I mean, this trash pack is dangerous in its own right, even on Tyrannical, right? Need to make sure you're getting kicks on the Marauders as well. The Infinite Slayer does a ton of AoE damage. Every single one of these Infinite Furies has to be dealt with. Remember, you're running no healer, so you need to have something committed for almost every single one of these casts here. Vampiric Embrace is the first option for both of the teams here as it heals through the first Infinite Fury for them. Probably Nature's Vigil the second one. Actually, no, Mandatory didn't even need to do it. They killed it off before it happened. Looks like it's going to be a similar thing for Last Hope as well. Health bars are dropping low, though. If the next cast starts up here and gets a couple ticks off, they could be in danger here. Looks like they're going to be fine. Just some healing potions to keep them topped off.
All good.
Will be all they
good.
need, but they just need to make up so much time, Dratnos. They're so far behind still, and Mandatory is the one with the advantage. They have the Bloodlust. They're going to be able to burn through this boss so quickly.
Yeah, at this point, Last Hope, I mean, if you're a Last Hope fan here, you are hoping for a Mandatory disaster of some kind of Infinity Orb juggling fiasco. Forgetting that they have Bloodlust available, that would help as well. If they just don't press that button, that would be something that might let Last Hope back into it, but you can see they're already getting combat here. Last Hope running against the wall here, just, powerless to accelerate this dungeon any further. They're going to be getting in combat, a solid 20 seconds later than Mandatory, and Mandatory do have that lust. Those Infinity Orbs, you got to be careful as well. On a 23 Tyrannical, those Infinity Orbs are going to do a lot of damage if they ever accidentally let a second one explode. So something they do have to be very, very careful of as they are starting work on the first of 4 Infinite Keepers here. Each of these Infinite Keepers will damage the boss for 20% of its health when it is killed. So they only have to actually do 20% of the boss's health themselves. The remaining 80 will be done by those Keepers. Also, when the boss gets low enough here, once it gets to like 6% or so, all of the aspects will come and start helping you out as well, giving you some nice buffs and doing some sizable damage to the boss too. So front-loading your damage on this fight is really valuable, especially in that last phase. You can see Lust is actually going to be popped here by Mandatory, so it will help them kill off the second Keeper and then the third and the fourth when they spawn together.
Yeah, having those 2 Keepers alive at the same time is one of the biggest dangers of this fight, especially, again, no healer. You really want to kill these as quickly as possible before they get to the other side of the room, summon their portal, and start casting those infinite burns on peoples. Those will definitely kill them off if they don't deal with them quickly. You can see they've already almost killed off one of them, and they're going to try to kill off the other before it gets too much damage out. No, both of them are dead. Beautiful execution from Mandatory. Last Hope on their end are going to have to do the same thing, but I fear for them it's going to be too little too late. The first Infinite Corruption cast is out for Mandatory. Health bars are looking great for them. The Dragons are already down and helping. There's Nozdormu. He's going to be meleeing the boss, giving them those buffs, and the next ones are soon to follow. Last Hope still right there, ready to capitalize if anything goes wrong for Mandatory, but I don't think that's going to happen to them.
Yeah, Last Hope are looking so clean on this fight. They're playing it so well. Their movement is looking so good as well, but it's just not going to be enough for them against Mandatory. A Mandatory that has made basically no mistakes in this series, that have just been so fast as well, and this is a completely different Mandatory than we saw in their Cup weekend. This is a Mandatory that has come ready to challenge everybody for the MDI Global Finals Championship, and that is going to be them taking their first game of the weekend, or the first series of the weekend, 2-0 over Last Hope.
Yeah, you want to talk consistency, you just look at Mandatory in this series with the 2-0 over Last Hope. I kind of think the opposite from what a lot of people are expecting going into this one, with the way Last Hope performed in their group versus the way Mandatory performed, but they just came and they look so much better today. And Last Hope, super clean final map, 0 deaths for them too, but just not quite the speed that Mandatory showed us.
I think Mandatory in their first pull actually made up a lot of time with like the discrepancy between that Moonkin and that Feral Druid. Moonkin just does like so much more damage on this first pull. Now a lot of it is going to end up being the Vanguards and the Mages, but they end up getting the mini bosses killed off a lot faster. The big, I think, time gain for Mandatory here was, funnily enough, actually going through this maze area. They got all 5 of their players through this maze area much faster than Last Hope's, and whenever they got all 5 of their players through the maze area, they were somewhere in the order of about 20 seconds ahead of Last Hope just by doing the maze quicker, and just like slight optimizations in the first area. Last Hope, I thought were going to come back. There was a little bit of a difference in lust timing, where Last Hope decided to lust Battlefield. I think it's reasonable. Mandatory instead deciding to lust Deos also worked out quite well for them. The middle part of this area, it was mostly the same. I think it's always really novel and cool, though, whenever you see like Rift Mages getting snapped with that summoning tech. I always love to throw it in the replays just because I think it looks cool whenever it's executed perfectly. But whenever you're talking about like the race between these two teams, there was actually a lot of interesting decisions too, talent-wise. Cryptics dropped Dragon's Breath and Blast Wave for the ability to be able to play invisibility speed, and that saved them, surprisingly enough, a little bit of time after Battlefield. So he actually is able to invis off and just like speed to the portal and get the RP started a little bit faster. They did unfortunately get the long RP, whereas Mandatory got the short RP, so there was going to be a little bit of a difference in time there. But I mean, look at Cryptics on the screen right here. He just triple blinks and is out of there with his invis speed. And I thought that there was maybe a chance that they came back, but whenever they got the long RP and Mandatory got the short RP, that was just going to be the end of it. Mandatory has lust for the final boss, and it was just over.
Yeah.
Such a close dungeon between the two teams, and like really very few mistakes being made. It's just slightly better execution throughout the entire dungeon at every single point from Mandatory. Also, we finally have settled the battle between Moonkin and Feral. Let's see here, 235k for Feral, 227k for Moonkin, but the Moonkin won, so you gotta add like 100k for that. So Moonkin's
So it sounds like we haven't really settled it then. It sounds like it's...
Yes. We've settled one dungeon's worth anyway, but...
Yeah, it sounds like there's some murkiness to which that was actually the play there.
Double the interrupts on the Feral Druid, though.
That's true.
If you look, yeah.
Although that doesn't count all the value you get out of a good beam. A good beam is gonna silence a lot of mobs.
That is
How about
true.
the HPS? On the HPS side of things, we saw 22 million healing for Mode and 22 million
exactly the
healing
same.
for Drogo. So all right,
Wow. Never mind.
Yeah. That really helps us
Both,
declare a clear winner.
Both
Yeah.
equally DPSing the emptiness in their team's life bars, so that is happening. Yeah.
All 3 of the Feral Druids and LFG are vehemently rejoicing.
Vehemently? Isn't that like
You're
a
just as
negative
good.
word, kind of?
Invite us, guys.
Vehemently is
Vehemently
forceful
rejoice.
or passionate.
Yeah, exactly. Their
Intense.
fist pump in the air. See, I used it correctly.
I
Yeah.
always thought that was more of a... I was more of like a... like it had more of a negative connotation with it,
Well, the American
forceful
education
negative
system
way.
failed you, I think.
Yeah, well, I mean that's clear, but you know, I hadn't thought about it in the vehemently sense until now.
Oh,
You know, usage of the word vehemently over time, by the way, peaked in the it looks like the 1840s, then declined and is on the rise again now.
Well, it's surprising then that you're not more familiar with it.
Oh no! Oh, God! No.
Officer, I'd like to report
I
a
salute
murder.
you, sir.
Officer, I'd like to report a
That was
murder.
a good one.
Oh man.
So, did I have ever told you about the time when enhancement shamans could use two-handers? Those were the days in Warsong Gulch, one-shotting the Clothies with my Wind Fury crits. Ah, yes. But ironically, you couldn't ride dinosaurs then, but you can now.
Did you say it ironically?
That's weird. No.
Never mind.
No, I didn't.
Is
Well,
there
it's
any
the end of
chance
the
we
day.
have a dungeon movement map or anything of the sort available?
I don't know if we have one. I haven't been informed yet. Oh, we do. Okay, we do.
Oh, that's really
All right.
good.
Thank goodness. Let's see what Razan's up to. Well, you know what this is.
Oh, wow, it's a whole
Wait,
Oh,
it's
it's
the
the whole map.
dungeon.
It's the whole map,
okay.
not just the boss sometime. Okay.
There's a long run in a straight line at the start, so this could be fall or thrown. It can't really be
Throne of the
Waycrest.
Tides. There's a mystery
It's got to be
there.
Throne of the Tides, right?
It's
Yeah,
a
because
very long run at the start, yeah.
in fall
It could
you
be
would be
Waycrest actually, but it's not.
no, it can't be. It can't be Waycrest, right? Because you turn at the start.
You go into the witch.
Yeah.
You go into Triad.
Yeah.
There's-
So now they're on. This is first boss of Throne of the Tides, right? And then they're going to U-turn and head back towards that room they were in, right?
I don't know about this. It kind of depends on how fall is displayed, right? Because there's a portal after Chronocar.
They're going
Now
back.
look at there's the U-turn,
Okay,
right?
this
now
is-
they're
this
back
has
on
to
the
be
second
thrown.
boss. It
Yeah,
must be-
you're
I mean,
absolutely
the line
right.
is just so straight as well. Like that. In fall, there's you do the sand area, right? It's like the second big area you're in, and that area is
You'd
not.
be going around in a circle for
yeah,
sure.
it'd be a much bigger circle. This has to be Throne of the Tides, and then
They're gonna
you're
turn off
back
to the
down.
left. Yep. Yeah. This
What
is
if production took one of the dungeons and like bent it so that the paths looked odd? I wouldn't put it past them.
That's true. Yeah. What if they?
Yeah.
What if this is all just one big Razan?
What
That's
if this
true.
is just a birthday cake?
That's true. That's true. These are things that have been done to us in the past, but it looks so much like a Throne of the Tides. It just has to be, right? Oh,
I think
there's
it
It's
the-
like
has
a
to be.
fishing pole. Oh.
Yeah.
Wait, no. This
Do you
was
guys
the
ever
symbol
notice that Throne of the Tides is a trident?
Oh, cool.
Oh, it kind of. I thought for a second it kind of looked like the symbol Prince used for a while too. Anyone remember Prince?
Yeah.
He's great. He's great. It is a trident, though, isn't it? Wow.
Yep. And there's Ozmak going down.
All right. I learned something new today. There it is.
There it is.
Yeah.
Yep. Throne of the Tides.
Okay.
Great work, Dranos. I feel like carried us pretty hard on that one.
I feel like it was obvious by the end. You guys would have definitely got it by the end, no matter what,
Oh,
as well,
yeah.
right? Like, there was no way it could have been anything else after the U-turn.
I think the Ataldazar Waycrest Manor not being possibilities due to how straight that first area is.
Yeah, I mean,
also
it's a straight
Definitely,
line,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed
Very
there.
cool.
Well, everybody got it right. So, ending the day in a positive way as far as the dungeon map deductions go.
Did we have all 2-0s today, by the way?
Yep.
We did. Yeah, 4-2-0.
Which is
kind of
shocking.
actually.
Like,
Yeah.
I was expecting there to be some 2-1s at least in our first day. But, I mean, all 2-0s, I think that does... I think if you ran this day 10 times, most of the time there would be a bunch of 2-1s. Like, I think we
Oh, totally.
like the Echo Eclipse series, I think that probably usually ends in a 2-0 for Echo. All of the other ones, I think, probably are usually 2-1s if you run
I
them a
agree.
bunch of times. Yeah.
I vehemently expected there to be 2-1s today. And
MDI
Yeah.
is kind of weird because you'll see a 2-0 in a lot of esports or other titles that'll be like a convincing victory. Whereas for MDI, it's just like kind of one of those things that just something goes slightly different. Then you have the other team winning 2-0, and it's not actually that convincing. I feel like all of these teams are incredibly competitive, and I think that there's a prime opportunity for losers brackets runs for all of the teams that got knocked down to the lower bracket today.
Yeah, I think it's really scary to be in the lower bracket in general. I mean, obviously for the normal reasons, but also because no matter who you are, you're going to be facing really strong teams down there this time around. It's not your average lower bracket, but it never is in the global finals. Look at that. Legendary versus Last Hope in the lower bracket in an elimination match. That is crazy.
Yeah, tomorrow's going to be a pretty heartbreaking day. We're going to be sending home 4 of these 8 teams. That is going to be very difficult to do this early. I mean, It feels like any of these teams going home early is, a shame. They're all just so good. But the good news is that we're going to get to see some very good games played to get the privilege of who gets a say and who has to go.
How are you guys feeling about Perplexed versus Mandatory, since we just saw Mandatory play?
I mean, I feel like that is going to be the big one tomorrow of, like, which of these teams is the, the ascendant challenger to Echo, and which of them is going to have to be the insurgent coming from the lower bracket.
I mean, they're both kind of due, right? I mean, I feel like they've been putting in the work for a lot of seasons. And
100%.
I feel like they're both kind of due for, like, a really, really good result at this point. So having them run into each other now is going to be interesting.
And they looked great today. Mandatory really kind of stuck to their word, saying that they felt more prepared for global finals. They said they felt like their consistency was going to be better and they were going to do better. I thought they looked...
I think they were the best team today. Like, if you put all 8 of our teams' runs against each other, I think you would look at Mandatories and be like, that was the best run, right? Like that, or those were the best 2 runs, because it certainly wasn't Echo.
100%.
Yeah,
just
Echo.
only 1 death between the 2 of them.
Yeah.
Echo had a great Black Rook, but an average rise. I would say a middling rise.
Well, for them, it was a terrible rise because they completely messed up their skip, like, in 3 different ways.
I say middling because I feel like any team can mess up their skip ever.
True. I think Mandatory was the only team to finish a dungeon without a death today, too. Yeah. Going back and looking at the dungeons. I think their run on Rise that we just saw was the only non-death run of the day.
It's really easy to die this season, and we amped up the key levels for global finals, and so it's going to be even easier and more frequent to see a lot of people just have some deaths.
Pretty crazy. Well, Makes has got to be feeling a bit more confident. She picked Mandatory as one of her 2 potentially Mandatory. Mandatory, the combination of Legendary and Mandatory. Yeah.
We do
super
that.
team coming at you next season. Apparently anything can happen on the predictions screen. We've seen some weird stuff.
If you don't pick Echo to win, I think it's fair to take. Honestly, why don't you just take the field instead of Echo?
Take the field over Echo,
Mandatory.
I think that would be fair. Yeah.
I'm taking Perplexed still. I felt like they looked really good today.
They did look good.
Bald, Hoplex, Mandatory dogs. Just the entire other part of the entire field. Oh, and Eclipse as well.
Is that all 7 teams?
No, I forgot to put Eclipse in there.
Here's the clip that now tweeted out this clip of the moment in that rise that you can see the...
Is that a savior backfire?
That's
the
the savior
savior
backfiring. Well, it always backfires, right? 3 seconds after it casts its res, it always explodes. It must have just forgotten about it.
Look at Maris. Dude, Maris just raises his eyebrows as he watches clicks fall off the side. I don't know how he didn't laugh. Like, that is an insanely funny moment.
He's always
Maris
expected
even
the robots to rise up, and now it's time. Yep.
Oh, he's dead and waiting for
He's
res?
dead right by the barrier, yeah.
Okay.
Waiting for a res.
eyebrows.
That's what Clicks was going to do. Clicks said, oh, the savior res doesn't work. I'm going to run over and soulstone him so we can get my summoning stone down, and he just forgot that the savior was going to explode. That's just too funny, man. See, that just goes to show you, even the best players, just sometimes slight lapses in concentration can happen for everybody.
Yeah.
I do love watching mirrors and this eyebrows and then just hands on the chin.
There's a moment of like, well, what are we supposed to do now?
That was unexpected. So I guess
That
we'll
didn't
just
happen
win
to us at
from here.
practice.
Yeah. And they won the dungeon. Yeah. They still managed
they
to come
won.
back from that. It's like, well, good. I was getting bored. Yeah, I could watch this all day.
Poor Clicks. This has been showed like 20 times in a row now.
I know, yeah. Wow. Dying more than Ryu at this point in terms of watched clips. If you know, you know. Anyway, we're sure to not see that ever again, right?
Well, I think it's very unlikely that that'll ever happen again, yeah.
Yeah. So that happened, but no one's been hit by a boulder yet. Although I feel like I did see some people come very close today.
I think that's
Where it's-
about as close to getting hit by a boulder you're going to get in the MDI
That
as that clip.
big shoulder armor clipped right through the edge of the boulder, and I was like, is this close? Oh, wow. Well, that brings us kind of to the end of the day, doesn't it, for day one of the Mythic Dungeon International Global Finals. Let's get some final thoughts. Tuttle, we'll start with you. How was your day? What did you think about what we witnessed in our 4 matches today?
I was a bit surprised that we had all 2-0s, especially with the competitive level that all these teams kind of showed today. Like Dratnos was saying, I think if you run back the day and if you simulate it, very infrequently do you have all 2-0s. I think that all of the teams are incredibly competitive with one another, and I think that there's an opportunity for a team to finally dethrone Echo after 7, 8, 9 consecutive MDI wins or something like that. There's maybe
5 years.
Yeah. There's a chance that I think and a mandatory and perplexed, they look really, really good. I think there's a chance.
What year is it? 2024, right?
As far as I know.
Yeah. So as of June, it'll be 5 years since Echo lost a final ever.
That is insane. That is insane.
So, yeah. Obviously, we talk a lot about them, but there's a very good reason for it, and I think this is the first time, like the most chance we've ever had of Echo losing, even since before that. Right? This is the best the field has looked ever.
Yeah, I do think it's going to be tough, though. If Echo stay in the upper bracket, it's very hard to beat them when they secure that Saturday early win, and then they're into Sunday in the upper bracket. And I think their chances of doing that are quite good here, because even if you think Perplexed or Mandatory can take them out, Echo are not playing against Perplexed or Mandatory tomorrow, right? They're playing against Bald Bandits, right?
Yes.
In the upper bracket.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
Bald Bandits looked really good, but are they going to be able to challenge Echo to stay in that upper bracket? That's going to be really, really hard. If they can, then that's going to be huge, not just for Bald Bandits, but also for every other team that's hoping to dethrone Echo. But if they can't, then I think Echo are going to still have that huge upper bracket advantage that they are usually so strong with on Sunday.
I have a boots on the ground report that Fragnance has actually shaved his head for this event to increase the aerodynamicism against his former team.
Wow, aerodynamicism.
That
impressive.
might be made up.
I don't think that's
the
real
word
world,
or the shaving,
but,
or both.
The word, the boots
Okay.
on the ground report about the bald head. That's legit. I would never make that up.
We need a
Picture didn't
camera
happen.
POV of that tomorrow, if that's the
that's
case.
right. We'll confirm. But going back to Echo for a moment, I don't know if people really realize what an accomplishment this is in any esport to go 5 years almost without losing a finals. Like that's a level of dominance that's like once in a generation, right? There's like players that have achieved that level of success, I think, in other games and things, and other teams have maybe come semi close. But I can't think of any other team in any other esport that has won so many times in a row, basically.
Goodbye, Jeff.
My camera's just decided to turn off. Well, sometimes my camera just overheats. It's decided it's time to end the broadcast, so I guess that's it too. Goodbye, Dratnos.
We're
As
being
darkness
played off.
descends on everyone. Goodbye, Tettles. We'll see you later. Hold on. What? Let's see. Turn my camera back on. Oh, is it gonna work? Sometimes it just turns off. No, it's just dead. It's just dead. Oh no, we're back. We're back. Yay.
Does my camera work? It turned off.
Why? I need one of my grandchildren to help me.
I remember when the first picture was taken back in 1865.
Can I take the battery out of this?
Oh,
there
wow.
we go.
Oh my god.
Yeah, it's thank goodness this screen saved us from whatever was happening just a moment ago. Well, let's end it on this. Let's finish it off right on this screen. Thanks for watching, everybody. This has been day one of the Mythic Dungeon International. That's right. We'll be back tomorrow with 6 exciting matches. Teams will be eliminated and teams will qualify for the top 4 on Sunday. You do not want to miss it. It's going to be epic. We'll see you then.